Hello and welcome everybody once again. We are here back with Kent and his ultimate history of video games. We are in part 6 of this read-through. This live stream read-through of this massive book. We are about 2/3 of the way through. I'm joined today by Mr. Alex Smith. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Excited to get into the legal stuff since I have some background in that.
Yes. So he'll be able to scrutinize the language. If there's one particle out of place, he'll know. So how is sunny Georgia treating you, Alex?
Well, it's been mostly rainy Georgia these last few days, but no, it's good. I'm mostly unpacked now. Most of the boxes are unpacked. My video game history book collection just got put on a shelf today, including my copy of Kent. So,
What are your prized possessions out of that lot? I'm assuming Kent isn't among them.
right. Well, I would say some of my prized possessions are some of the stuff that's a little harder to come by. So, I have all 4 volumes of so far of Gorge's History of Nintendo, en français, and I have the in Japanese I think it was Famitsu that put them out. Famitsu, the Sega Consumer History and Sega Arcade History books. Spent a pretty penny on Amazon getting those. In terms of the quality stuff on the shelf, I mean, Masters of Doom is up here, and that's about the greatest from just a pure writing standpoint. Got Breakout here, Craddock's book on the Apple II. A couple of the chapters get a little dicey, but most of it is truly outstanding. That's some of the highlights.
Nice. Of course, I pilfered your bookshelf when I kept begging for my copy of The Great World, which is right beside me right now.
Very good, very good.
It is here for whenever I need it, and right now it is serving as a pillow for my hard drive. So
there you go.
My backup.
It has many uses.
Yes.
It has many uses. Knowledge, self-defense, and even pillowing hard drives.
Beautiful. Put that on the cover next time. All right. We're getting into Chapter 21, The Legal Game. All right, I'm now going to represent the entire United States Congress with this quote.
Every Congress throughout history. Every single elected Congress. All 100 plus of them.
Beautiful. Tens of thousands of people. Absolutely amazing. A computer program is a set of statements or instructions to be used directly or indirectly in a computer to bring about a certain result. Okay.
I heard the gravitas. I heard the definitely.
All computer software exists as electrical pulses, yet Congress explicitly intended copyright protection to computer software as a literary work. And this is Bear, so you can take him.
All right. If you stack the notes from my appearances in court and measure them end to end, that stack would probably be about 2 feet long. If you take all of the paperwork from all of the Magnavox cases, it would be at least 200 feet. Enough to fill 2 storage rooms in a private storage facility in Chicago.
Which it did, which is why he says this. And
yes.
These are the records that he and David Winter went and pilfered around this time. It would have been in late 90s, early 2000s, when they were just about to wind up what was the last residual cases that Magnavox was filing against people. Probably the last one that they did was against Acclaim, back when they were going into bankruptcy, but they were suing them for past infringement stuff.
Right.
But yeah, they had these warehouses full of stuff. They pulled out what they could. They planned to go back, but by the time they went back, the lawyers had emptied it all out because they didn't need it anymore.
So sad.
So there's a couple versions of the original brown box that he wasn't able to save, and of course whatever records he wasn't able to. But as far as I tell, they got quite a bit.
Absolutely.
So yeah, he and David Winter went and did that, and then David Winter decided to horn it all. Anyways, let's get on to the next part of this. Yeah. Well, that's another discussion for another time. Lasting decisions. Video game companies began talking to each other in court before the term video game was ever coined. Nope, that is incorrect, because we know when both of these things happened. So,
yes.
Alex, you give the video game explanation while I type this down.
Oh, I have to...
The term video game.
No, I know. I have to pull up, like, All in Coiler for a quarter for that. But, yeah, the video game term does go back pretty early. It goes back to...
March 1973.
Yep, March 1973 in the trade. So you've got trade publications, and that allows us to see when that was starting to enter usage.
The claimant behind the name is Mr. Eddie Adlam, still
yes,
kicking it around. He told me when I asked him specifically about this, is that there was a term for this new type of jukebox, which was an audio video. I forget exactly what the type of jukebox that this was, but he was like, oh yeah, there's a video. That's a term that stuck in his mind. And then he was like, oh, video game, like that. But, as it turns out, there is a document from Nolan Bushnell in which he very explicitly refers to a video game in his Bally contract back in 1972.
Yep.
Now, that wasn't a public use, so that doesn't really count to what this is saying. But the first mention of public mention of video game that we all agree on is March 1973. There is one from 1972, but Keith dismisses that it wasn't descriptive rather than a noun. I think it's a noun, but that's another thing.
Yeah, but there is, and there is the, with Nolan's use, of course, also like you said, the private and public use. Because like the OED, for instance, Oxford English Dictionary, they look for the first actual, published or printed use of a word when they go to word origins, rather than what people might have been saying on their own.
So it should be Cashbox. They probably still have it wrong in their thing. But so that was the widespread use of the term March. But then the first suit, which is not covered in this chapter, was between Allied Leisure and Bally.
Allied Leisure.
Yeah. Which I can't remember exactly when it was filed. I think maybe like June or something like that. It was over a dispute on the copyright of their printed circuit boards. But that is actually after the first mention of the word video game. Semantics, but we are all here for the semantics. Isn't that right?
That is the whole point of this 28-page, 4,833 word document. Absolutely.
Oh boy.
And we're only 2/3 of the way through.
Yep.
Heaven help us.
No, I can tell you it's going to get worse before it gets better. Magnavox, the first console manufacturer, sued Atari, the first commercially successful arcade company. This is one of I complained about this before, but arcades are not all video games. All right.
Exactly.
As early as 1973, nope, it was not.
Nope. April 1974.
April 15th.
Wall Street Journals. Yep, Wall Street Journal's got us covered there, or had us covered there. And of course, we have the complaint now. And of course, Atari then did its own suit, and it all got very complicated.
Well, I mean, Atari was sued in 75.
Okay, 75.
The Bally suit was 74.
Yep. Oh, no, Atari was sued in 74. They were all sued in 74. Atari, Bally, Empire Distributing, Chicago
I was looking at
Coin.
this recently. As I was organizing my things, the Atari suit was separate. It was in California. It was filed 1975.
No. That was... The California suit was Atari's suit against Magnavox. So Magnavox sued Atari, and then Atari sued Magnavox to try to invalidate the patents. Midway did the same thing in New York. That's why the case is in New York, California, and Chicago. Magnavox filed suit in Chicago, Midway filed suit in New York, Atari filed suit in California, and eventually those 3 cases were consolidated in Chicago.
Let me double check this, because I remember I found the document where Atari was first added. So I'm not sure that was 1974, so I'm gonna have to check that. I'll put a question mark on that. Come back to that later.
No, they were part of the first. It was
nope.
It was,
the very
Atari...
first filing does not have Atari on it. I know that for 100% certain. The first complaint, I have it right here.
The first complaint, I believe Midway sued Magnavox before Magnavox sued
Right, that
everybody.
was in New York. But then
right, that's the New York case.
Yeah, but then the Chicago case does not name Atari. At first, it adds them later. Magnavox Corporation versus Bally Manufacturing, Chicago Dynamic Industry. Okay, it is actually on here.
Yeah.
Right. I thought, I thought for sure that I wasn't. All right. Okay. I thought, yeah.
No, that one I know cold.
Yeah, but there are things that we once thought we knew.
Yes. Now Atari did sue in California, right. And then that was consolidated in. And of course, the home stuff was added in '75, and then Sears was added at that time.
Mm-hmm. But that's a timeline for another time. We'll break it down.
Yep.
Coming the year after the introduction of Pong. At the time, people did not know whether to call Pong a computer game or a television game. I mean, people kind of quickly settled on the video game thing, except in Britain, where they separate video and computer games like weirdos. And they say video game is one word.
Yes.
There have been hundreds of legal actions throughout the history of video games. Oh, I can tell you it's thousands. I don't have to look that up, but whatever.
Right.
Many of these actions, such as Magnavox's protection of its technology patents, have resulted in insignificant trials or out-of-court settlements. Well, not just insignificant.
I don't think the Magnavox stuff was insignificant at all.
Other cases had important ramifications for the future copyright protection of antitrust actions. I'm not sure any of these actually cover antitrust, but we'll see.
Well, the Atari Corp case is in there, isn't it?
No, I think only in the Atari game, only Tengen's
the Atari
in
Corp
here.
case, because the Atari Corp case is antitrust.
I know, but I'm not sure that the Corp one is, but we'll see. All right, Data East v. Epics. I would definitely like to get my hands on this case, but it's in the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, I believe, or 11th. Can't remember, whatever California is.
9th. California's the 9th.
In 1984, Data East released a game titled Karate Champ.
So far.
Though it was not the first two-player fighting game. Okay, let's see what this says. The first two-player fighting game was Warrior, released by Cinematronics in 1979.
I mean, it always depends on how you define fighting game. Is boxing fighting? Because in that case, heavyweight champ comes before Warrior.
If you count the limited release of Fredotronic, then Swords is a fighting game.
Right, and if Warrior is a fighting game, certainly Swords is a fighting game, because Warrior is a sword fighting game. It's not a, mano-a-mano martial arts game, so...
I'm gonna say not the first fighting, because I'm pretty sure he's using a pretty broad definition here.
Yeah.
So. It was the first two-player martial arts tournament game and the progenitor of a genre that in the early 1990s would become extremely popular. And the 80s, too.
Yeah.
But I guess he's narrowly defining this as fighting game. But whatever.
Karate Champ was a massive hit in its own right. I mean, yeah. Helped bring the arcade back after the crash.
In America.
Yes.
In Karate Champ, players controlled a martial artist as he battled computer-controlled fighters in tournament-style combat. Karate Champ had two-player simultaneous action as well. You said that up here.
Yeah, so why wouldn't you just say players controlled a martial artist as they battled each other or you controlled fighters? I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. It featured several realistic blocks, kicks, punches, and had large, relatively human-looking characters. The game was a modest hit in arcades.
I would say it was more than a modest hit. And it was huge. In it really wasn't that big on the NES because it was
Shit.
it was pretty old by the time the NES came out. But if you look through the SPA, the Software Publishers Association's list of gold, silver, gold, and platinum sellers, Karate Champ was one of the very few to be certified at 500,000 copies sold, or 250,000, whatever it was. No, 500,000. I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was 500.
Okay.
I'd have to pull it up, but the point is, it was a pretty big deal. It just kind of gets lost in memory because it was in that weird period in between the Atari and NES eras in the U.S.
Yeah, it's one of those older games that was already out on the Famicom. They put out in the U.S. and all those games just kind of look like crap when we look at them back now. In October 1985, Data East released a home version of Karate Champ for the Commodore 64 computer. 1 month later, the British company System 3 released a similar game titled International Karate.
I'm going to be really super pedantic here, but I am pretty sure it is a numeral 3, not a Roman numeral 3. I'm going to confirm that, but almost positive.
When California-based Epix Inc. licensed the game and released it as World Karate Championship for the Commodore 64 in April 1986, Data East took Epix to court, claiming the overall appearance, compilation, and sequence of the audiovisual display of the video game World Karate Championship infringed upon Karate Champ. Data East also claimed that the World Karate Championship infringed upon its trademark and trade dress. Explain to me what trade dress is.
I'm guessing a thing made up by Kent. I'm almost positive. I mean, even in law school, I didn't take much IP law because that wasn't an area that I was planning to focus on at the time. But trade dress is the characteristics of the visual appearance of a product or its packaging that signify the source of the product to consumers.
So, literal dress. Okay.
Yeah. I wonder if they might have then. I mean, that's plausible.
The case went before Judge William A. Ingram of the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. Upon looking at both games, Ingram found several areas of similarity to support Data East's claim. 1. Each game had 14 moves. 2. Each game has a 2-player option. 3. Each game has a 1-player option. 4. Each game has forward and backward somersault moves and about-face moves. 5. Each game has a squatting reverse punch wherein the heel is not on the ground. 6. Each game has an upper lunge punch. 7. Each game has a back foot sweep.
Sweep the leg. Sweep the leg.
Of course. 8. Each game has a jumping side kick. 9. Each game has a low kick. 10. Each game has a walk backwards position. 11. Each game has changing background scenes. 12. Each game has 30-second countdown rounds. 3. Each game uses one referee. 14. In each game, a referee says begin, stop, white, red, which is depicted by a cartoon style speech balloon. And 15. Each game has a provision for 100 bonus points per remaining second. I mean, they really should have changed those things.
Yeah, don't they both? I mean, it's not mentioned here, but don't they both have the bull charging bonus game as well?
Yeah, I've never actually looked at World Championship.
Yeah, I think even the bonus game is. I mean, International Karate was ripped off of Karate. The creator will tell you today. I mean, it's no secret.
Because now he's on good legal footing because of this case. So
Yes.
World Karate Championship borrowed other elements from Karate Champ. Both games featured fighters in either red or white karate gis, and both featured bonus rounds in which players earned extra points by breaking bricks or dodging dangers. The court recognized that as both games depicted karate tournaments, some duplication was inevitable. Karate in general, and the karate tournaments in particular, included standard features such as karate gis, certain moves, and referees. Matches at karate...
They don't normally feature bowls. I mean...
I don't know if Karate Champ has the bull charging game. It has the brick breaking one. It has the plates flying at you one. I don't remember the bull. I've played it. But
Yeah, no, let's see. Yeah, yeah. The stopping a charging bull is in Karate Champ,
okay.
and I'm pretty sure it's also in International Karate. I mean, that's the one that's kind of a dead giveaway because it's like you can't put that down to similarity between depictions of karate.
I guess Epic's had some nice evasive lawyers to skirt around that
Yes.
issue.
Yep.
The fights, matches at karate tournaments involve two fighters earning points by performing combat maneuvers. The fights are scored by referees who award certain points for various moves. In his decision, Judge Ingram also noted both games were made for the Commodore computer and that various constraints were inherent in the use of that computer, except one wasn't originally made for the Commodore computer.
Yeah.
Even granting those constraints, the judge found too many similarities to ignore. The distressed court found that, except for the graphical quality of Epic's expressions, part of the scoreboard, the referee's physical appearance, and minor particulars in the bonus phases, Data East's and Epic's games are qualitatively identical. Based on these findings, Judge Ingram ordered Epic's to recall World Karate Championship and International Karate. Wait, what?
Yeah. It was overturned.
Both? Yeah, but it says
Well, International Karate is the original name of the game,
But-
and when Epix released it in North America, they called it World Karate Championship.
How could they recall International Karate? They didn't publish it in Britain, I'm pretty sure.
Well, no, they didn't publish it in Britain. System 3 did. They only published it in.
Then how would
in
they
the US.
recall International
Well,
Karate?
the order is being broad to make sure that they, don't get around it or something by releasing it under the original name. That if there are any copies of International Karate that Epix has released, they need to recall them.
Right.
That's really all it's saying there.
His decision was overturned, however, by Judge Stephen S. Trott of the United States Court of Appeals, Ninth Circuit. Now,
it would have been overturned by a 3-judge panel. That's how the appeals courts work. Last I checked. Unless this was just a temporary injunction and like a single judge was ruling on the injunction or something.
I mean,
There's something not right here because appeals I don't know this particular case well enough to know what was actually brought before the appeals court. But generally speaking, an appeals court is, a panel of 3 judges rules on a case at the appellate level.
and the one thing that gets me about this is like putting these judges as central figures, but not explaining who they are at all. That's
Really, Kent doesn't know who they are. He's just reading the opinions. It's
I know.
oh, this opinion was, and that's probably what confused him here. He was like, oh, this opinion was written by Stephen Trott. He probably didn't even bother to look that there was a 3-judge panel that should have been, doing it.
To establish copyright infringement, Data East must prove ownership of a valid copyright by copying by Epix of the copyrighted work. It is undisputed that Data East is registered copyright owner of the audiovisual work for each version of Karate Champ. Thus, we need only determine whether Epix copied Karate Champ. This sounds simple and straightforward. It is not. According to Trott, there was no direct evidence that System 3, the original creator of International Karate, had access to the Commodore computer version of Karate Champ. What? Why does that matter?
Yeah, why? I mean, I assume he's taking that from the case, so
Yeah.
I think the judge thought it mattered, but yeah, it's like, it's not the original version.
He listed Judge Ingram's 15 similarities and identified them as inherent to the sport of karate. According to Trott, karate is not susceptible of a wholly fanciful presentation. Why is that sick?
And he needs Judge Trott. I hope Judge Trott is watching Cobra Kai these days because you want to talk about wholly fanciful presentations of karate. Anyway.
Why is this sick? Susceptible of a wholly fanciful present. Why is that wrong?
It's probably supposed to be susceptible to instead of susceptible of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, what's the footnote here? In later years, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter II, and other completely fanciful martial art games that built off a Karate Champ formula would come to dominate both the home market and the arcade industry.
I would personally not say that they built off the Karate Champ formula, but, whatever.
They went off of ER Kung Fu.
Yes.
In his decision, the judge stated that the only parts of the game that could be protected by a copyright were the areas in which Data East made creative contributions, namely the scoreboard and the background scenes. These, however, were the areas in which Karate Champ and World Karate Championship were most different. Based upon these two features, a discerning 17.5-year-old boy... this thing... could not regard the works as substantially similar. Accordingly, Data East copyright was not infringed on this basis either. Yeah, it does not explain in this passage here, but basically they decided that the average audience for this type of game was a 17-and-a-half-year-old boy. Why? Yes. We don't know. We would have to have the case to figure out why the hell they thought that was the right age.
Right.
Trott found in favor of Epix and reversed Ingram's decision. Epix was allowed to market World Championship Karate. This decision would have a decisive impact on future decisions, including another case with Data East. In 1993, Capcom released the game Street Fighter II, which became an international arcade sensation. Shortly after the game was released for home systems, Data East released the fighting game Fighter's History, which had singular combatants and moves. Capcom took Data East to court, claiming infringement, but the courts ruled in Data East's favor.
See, here's your antitrust. Here it is.
All right. You win this time, Kent.
Oh, no, this is Atari Games. Sorry, this is Atari Corporation.
Okay. Yeah, see,
but isn't it Atari Games Incorporated? Aren't they Atari Games Inc., not Atari Games Corp? That's what screwed me up there for a second.
Yeah, it might be Atari. Like, I remember that there is legitimate confusion, because I think there was kind of like a refiling at some point.
Oh no, it is Atari Games Corp versus Nintendo of America Inc. is the case. Okay. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know at what time it actually changed to corporation, but
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, because it's the weird thing. It's Atari Games Corporation and Atari Corporation.
Now we're going to get some bad history coming here before we start the case.
In 1975, Stephen Ross, president of Warner Communications, divided Atari into two
companies. Okay, we're already in trouble. We're already in trouble because he wasn't president of Warner Communications. He was chairman and CEO. Warner did not have a president. It had an office of the president that was held by between like 3 and 5 people at various different times.
Yeah, we've already covered some of that.
Yeah.
Manny being listed as a VP and all that.
Divided
Atari into two companies and sold off shares of each. They sold.
No, it was
most of the.
And it was not divided.
Yeah.
And it was not divided into two companies. They carved pieces of Atari off. They did not literally split Atari.
Yeah, it was assets
new companies
they sold.
Yeah, and in fact, Atari continued to exist as a shell company, holding company of Warner until 1992. So they never sold Atari. What they did is they carved pieces of Atari off and sold them to other people that incorporated them into their own companies.
Yeah, and that's why it's Atari Games Corporation rather than Atari Inc.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, getting way too far in the weeds, after they sold the consumer stuff to Tramiel, they changed the name of the whole company to Atari Games Inc. It wasn't just the coin-op. It was everything they had left, which included, the phone stuff still at that point, and they still had some location-based stuff at that point. So
Atari Adventure.
So it's more complicated than that, but it is mostly just corporate minutia. I mean, it's not like important to what happened, but it is complicated.
He sold 75% of Atari Corporation. That kind of is encapsulated all in this here. 75. I don't know. They probably didn't even keep a 25% share in Atari Corp. I don't think that's true. It was less than that.
I'd have to look at Current's timeline because he'll have the right stuff. I know they kept a share, but I couldn't tell you what it is without looking.
Well, they didn't keep a share. They bought a share as part of the agreement.
Yeah, right. Because Yeah, they bought a share of Tramel's company because they didn't sell a company called Atari Corporation to Tramel. They sold assets that to Tramel Technology Limited, which then reincorporated as Atari Corporation once it owned those assets.
Right.
They didn't sell Atari Corporation like it was a company that already existed.
Formerly known as Consumer Division to Jack Tramiel, he kept 40% of Atari Games Corporation. No, I'm putting this as a separate era, though, because they kept most of it. I don't know if it was 100%, but...
No. So...
yeah, but they're saying that this is when the split happened.
Right, but look, read the rest of it. So he's got the timing off. The timing's wrong.
He kept 40% of Atari Games Corporation, the arcade division.
Right, they kept 40% of Atari Games when they sold to Namco. That part's correct. What's incorrect is that he makes it sound like this is all happening at the same time, and it's not. Right. The arcade stuff was sold well after Tramel, because Tramel bought his portion in 84, and Namco bought their portion in 85. Almost a year, about half a year apart. It was like February or March 85, somewhere in there.
I think, February sounds right. And sold the rest of them to Masaya Nakamura, founder of Namco. No, they just sold it to Namco.
Yeah, they sold it to Namco.
yeah, Nakamura personally didn't own the entirety of Atari Games Corporation. Well,
it was a subsidiary.
Yeah,
it was a subsidiary of a corporation.
Nakamura had hoped to develop synergy between the two companies. Instead, he found the arrangement unsatisfactory and decided to sell his stake in Atari. Well, much later.
Well, that's wrong because he decided to sell a portion of his share.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're going to take that one, the earlier one, as a timing mistake, this is also a timing mistake because he did eventually sell all the shares.
Well, right, but again, it's the context. He's talking about the sale in 87 that made Atari Games independent. So at that time, he only sold a fraction of his shares. Kent got this so horribly wrong. Basically, he owned 60%. He owned 60% of the company, and he took his share down to 40%, and gave part of his share to Nakajima and the employees. So at that point, it was 40% owned by Warner, 40% owned by Namco, and 20% owned by Atari Games' employees. And the reason it was an independent company at that point is because no one entity had a majority controlling share in the company.
But they could pretty much be outvoted.
And what people don't realize is that Nakamura actually remained the chairman of the board of Atari Games until the middle of 1988.
Backed by a group of employees and Time Warner. No, Time Warner had nothing to do with the buyout.
No, because Time Warner still had 40% of the company. Yeah. They were not involved. Boo. Boo earns.
Hideyuki Nakajima, the man Nakamura sent to manage Namco's American operations, bought Atari Games in 1987.
Yeah, bought 20% of it.
We've covered it. Nakajima is generally remembered as a smart and extremely likable man with a long history in the video game industry. All right, what does this say? He died of lung cancer. Okay, it's just spoiling the end here. I will say that I've talked to people who both admire and not really like Nakajima. He was a decisive person. I think mainly just because, where he came from and all that. But I think in general he was liked. I think that's the prevailing attitude. Maybe not by Nintendo people, but...
Yes.
When Nolan Bushnell first opened Atari Japan in 1973, well, it wasn't him, but,
right.
He hired Nakajima to manage it.
No he did not. There was a president over his head, over top of him, and then when the president stopped showing up to work, Nakajima just kind of became the boss by default.
1 year later, Bushnell sold the operation to Namco, and Nakamura hired Nakajima to continue running the company.
He was Yeah.
I'm pretty
This
sure
is
we
me.
touched on this earlier, so I think we have the
Oh.
Ron Gordon stuff in here, but
Yeah.
Uh,
He was very American for a Japanese man. Culturally, they are different people, but he was almost like an American with a Japanese accent. Just a really neat man. I remember I was at an Atari convention down in Hilton Head, and I asked him some sort of a philosophical question about the industry, and he looked at me and he said something like, "That is a strange question for the preacher to be asking." I really got a kick out of that. Here was this big deal from Namco and Atari calling me the preacher.
I mean, you do direct public opinion, so
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
He had an editorial, every month.
Shortly after taking over Atari, Nakajima decided to leverage some of Atari's arcade games as consumer products. He could not publish the games under the name Atari banner because the consumer rights to the Atari name belonged to Atari Corporation. Instead, Nakajima created a wholly owned subsidiary of Atari Games called Tengen. And I'm sure that this is just
saying it's the center of
blah,
the
blah,
board.
blah. I don't care.
Yes.
Not gonna read
Yay.
that.
You're right, Kent. Good for you.
At the time, the only viable outlet for video games was the hugely lucrative Nintendo Entertainment System market. I mean,
Let's pour one out for INTV Corp, shall we?
1% of the market.
Exactly.
Sega was not licensing games for the Master System.
Whoa, that's wrong.
Okay, so I was told recently by
Reisinger.
Yeah, by Don Reisinger, who was the marketing head at Sega of America when they were doing the Master System, that explicitly that Japan did not want people to be licensing games on the Master System, to be developing games for the Master System, that they wanted to express a greater degree of control.
Yeah, that's probably true for 87. Yeah, which is the time period we're talking here. When Tonka got a hold of it, it was different. But
yeah, at some point, obviously, there was a change because there are third-party games that did appear on the Master System. But yeah, I mean, I can't entirely take his word for it because it's only one person that I've heard out of this, and there are some people who've said they did have an effort to try and get third parties involved. I'm sure that probably Bruce Lowery would say that, but I'm not sure he's been asked specifically about that.
I can't remember if I did or not. I'd have to go back to the recording.
So it is something that develops eventually, but this may be true. It was probably, I assume Kent based his understanding on the fact that he didn't know about any third-party games on the Master System, so he was assuming they didn't do it. So this is accidentally maybe correct.
Yes.
Based on one person's perspective, who said this very vehemently, Don Reisinger, Sega did actively try not to get third parties on the Master System. But that's
Very
just
good.
his perspective.
Very good.
And the Atari 7800 had barely made a dent in the market. But the
it's not strictly incorrect, but I mean, Sega didn't make a bigger mark than the Atari 7800. Like, why isn't his thing that Sega and Atari had barely made a dent in the market? But anyway, It's just weird. It's not wrong.
Right. To break into the market, Nakajima knew he would need to become a licensee of Nintendo, so he met with Nintendo President Minoru Arakawa and Senior Vice President Howard Lincoln in 1987 to discuss the terms of their licensing agreement. Nakajima wanted special privileges that had not been granted to other licensees. Let's see, what does it say? Nintendo licensees could only publish 5 games per year, except that one instance where we found that they didn't, but that's...
Yeah, but that was at the very beginning. I think it probably...
I mean, I still need to do the count, so there might be another instance of that. But
well, yeah, but there might have been some weirdness in the first year or so, is all I'm saying, just because, it was new.
Well, I mean, the same thing happened in Japan, too.
Well, Japan, you mean that there were special favors for the early people?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there were. I mean, the Japan's, system took a while to get sorted out, too, and so it might be the same thing in America. I'm sure they had the 5 games per year and 2-year exclusivity, by 1987. I'm sure they must have.
Once a game was published on the NES, it could not be released for other platforms for 2 years. Nakajima requested that both stipulations be waived. As the only company with access to the Atari library, I mean, that kind of goes without saying, he felt that Tengen had more to contribute, but Arakawa insisted that all licensees receive the same terms. Nakajima ultimately agreed to Nintendo's terms and signed on as a licensee in December 1987. What Arakawa and Lincoln did not realize is that they were entering into a trap. But wait,
it's a trap!
But is it a trap? Like, I don't know. I mean, I presume, like, what the logic here is that it's like he's learning about their distribution ways, and that's the trap. But
right,
no, that's not the trap.
Exactly. But yeah, that's just dramatic.
It is not known if Nakajima ever planned to honor the licensing agreement, but Atari engineers began trying to discover ways around the security devices in the Nintendo Entertainment Systems a full year before he signed the agreement. The NES had a custom-designed security chip containing a protocol called 10NES programming that detected unlicensed cartridges and prevented them from working on the console. Atari first attempted to analyze and replicate the NES security system in 1986. Atari could not break the 10NES program by monitoring the communication between the master and slave chips themselves. Atari analysts chemically peeled layers from the NES chips to allow microscopic examination of object code. Nonetheless, Atari could not decipher the code sufficiently to replace the NES security system. Let's see, what does this note say? This is a figurative statement.
Oh, good lord.
Microscopic I mean, there is technically a code structure on a chip, but
yeah, who knows?
But this is disputed by who was it? Edlog or who did Kevin talk to?
It wouldn't surprise me if it was Edlog, but I don't know. However, I'm assuming that the stuff in the court case is accurate because
so like what
this is not based on willy-nilly reminiscences.
Right.
There'd be documentary evidence that was found in discovery.
Like, I mean, it's kind of one of these things where the programmers are trying to prove the hubris of the executives. So basically, it's claimed by someone who was working on the reverse engineering process that they actually had figured it out before they went this other route to go in this direction. So according to at least one programmer on the reverse engineering, the Atari programmers had actually figured out how to do it legitimately, that they had reverse engineered the NES chip, but then the higher-ups decided to go a different route. But of course, that really doesn't make any sense if that was 100% true.
Exactly. Oh, you figured out the chip? Well, that's great, but we'd rather lie to the patent office. I mean, no.
Yeah, so that's, maybe they got close. Maybe they, hit a wall at some point. Or maybe they could have potentially thought they did it, but yeah, they didn't.
I could see a scenario where they said, we're this close, just give us X amount of time and X amount of money and we can bring it over to the finish line, and management said, no, that's too long, we're just going to cheat. I can see that scenario happening.
Yeah,
but I doubt it was done.
Yeah, and of course, the ironic thing is that they were trying to, or the other people who got around the lockout chip, they didn't need to go this full way route of reverse engineering the chip.
They just zapped it.
Yeah, they found a way to turn it off or piggyback on an existing lockout chip in a pre-existing game. So, the irony is going the full non-circuitous route was probably the thing that killed them.
Yeah.
Nintendo Company Limited did not have this security system when the Famicom was released in Japan. The system was designed for the NES, and it was built around a special chip that was placed in all consoles and cartridges. I mean, there's two different. I mean, it's part of the program, right?
I'm not technical enough to say definitively, but right, I think there's not a chip in the game. I think it's just there's a code string that has to be sent to the chip on
a decrypted
the console
thing. So
yeah.
But I know the 10 NES chip specifically is just for the console.
Right.
And as far as I know, there is no chip in the cartridge for that handshake.
Yeah, that would surprise me very much.
The chips worked like a lock and key, communicating signals in an initialization process. The NES simply ignored cartridges that lacked the security chip, and Atari's engineers were unable to duplicate it. In 1988, as Nakajima agreed to release versions of Pac-Man, RBI Baseball, and Gauntlet, his lawyers found another method of analyzing the security chip. They illegally obtained a reproduction of the 10 NES program through the Copyright Office by signing a false affidavit stating that they needed to use it in a copyright infringement suit Nintendo had filed against them. The suit was entirely fictional. After deciphering the 10 NES program, Atari developed its own program, the Rabbit program, to unlock the NES. The Rabbit program generates signals indistinguishable from the 10 NES program. The Rabbit gave Atari access to NES owners without Nintendo's strict license conditions. Submitting the false affidavit was a mistake that would haunt Atari in future court actions. According to several accounts, a team of Atari engineers running a clean room operation was close to breaking the 10 NES code. Okay, now they flip it around.
Yeah.
Or I guess nowadays, Ed Log says that they did it. But in
there
this
you
case,
go, yeah.
By illegally obtaining a reproduction of the code from the Copyright Office, Atari tainted the operation.
Some paralegal went to the Copyright Office, got the information, and showed it to somebody at Atari. The fact that he had access to it basically means that somebody had the information and showed somebody at Atari, which basically means that we had knowledge of it. So some paralegal fucked up.
I think they were going to do it anyway, but that's...
I mean, if you've submitted a false affidavit to get it, it wasn't some accidental somebody got it and showed it to somebody else.
Yeah, it's in reverse engineering, you have to peel it apart first. And then gain your information that way. On December 12th, 1988, with 3 NES unlicensed games on the market... NES licensed games on the market, and a complete understanding of NES marketing and security. He skips that whole marketing part. Atari filed...
Game over.
I know.
He just... No, I'm just saying that for the stream. It's like, read Game Over. He stole all of this from Game Over anyway.
Atari filed suit against Nintendo, alleging that Nintendo was improperly using its patent and greater market share to monopolize the home video game market. Atari asked for $100 million in damages, which is ridiculous, but
yes.
But you could in a civil suit you can basically claim.
But RBI baseball, Ethan.
All of the pieces were in place, though. Through the original licensing agreements, Atari had obtained access to retailers. Through the Copyright Office, it had obtained a complete understanding of NES technology. Atari can now manufacture its own cartridges, and the court action would work as a preemptive strike against any injunctions Nintendo might file. Is that how it works? If you file a preliminary suit that they can't injunct you?
As I always say, I'm not really a lawyer, I only play one on TV, but that doesn't seem like it would be accurate at all.
Yeah. One unanswered questions about this case is why Hideo Nakajima would choose such an aggressive tact for dealing with Nintendo. Some people quietly speculate that it dated back to licensing disagreements between Hiroshi Yamauchi, president of Nintendo, and Namco president Masaya Nakamura. Nakamura received some preferential treatment when he originally signed Namco as a Nintendo licensee, but when the contract expired, Yamauchi refused to renew those preferential terms. The change in terms led to an angry rift between Nintendo and Namco.
Mr. Yamauchi tried to take away all of the special provisions of the contract that Namco enjoyed as a first licensee, and because of that, the relationship suffered. I became very upset about the whole situation at the time, but looking back, that was just his business management philosophy, because, now he wants to do business with them again. I shouldn't have become upset about it. Although I must admit that I was pretty upset at the time, but I have no ill sentiments now. When you consider the technical expertise and the depth of the technical know-how of Namco, which Namco currently possesses, as reflected by the success of Namco games, Nintendo may have lost a lot more than Namco by taking that approach. It's like, yeah, that's just corporate doublespeak when they were making up with each other. There's no way Nakamura believed a word of that when he said it.
One event that may have added to Hideyuki Nakajima's resentment of Namco and Minoru Arakawa in particular... Nintendo and Minoru Arakawa in particular was a small dinner gathering at Arakawa's house in August 1988, at which Nakajima was a guest. Well, by this time, they'd already, gotten the information and everything, so I'm not sure.
Exactly, but again, this is the story from Game Over, and I have to say, it's a little bit shameful that Kent, goes on about, according to several accounts, and this and that, when all of this was stuff that was gathered by David Sheff and published in Game Over, and Kent is just piggybacking off of that. Maybe he asked some of the sources, because he interviewed the same people, so he may have asked some of them to confirm the stories that they told Sheff, and that might be how he gets away with it, but he should have mentioned Sheff.
Right. According to several accounts, Arakawa, Howard Lincoln, and Nakajima had just finished dinner and gone out on a deck to talk. While they were outside, Arakawa, known for taking short naps when the urge struck, fell asleep for a few minutes. According to Lincoln, Nakajima seemed offended when he left the party later that evening. Nakajima may have taken offense to Arakawa's falling asleep, but it should be noted that Atari had already used the false affidavit to obtain the reproduction of the 10NES by the time. So
there you go. Kent's got you covered there. Sometimes he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, but, then why would you frame this as, this was the final straw?
You're right. I've heard that story many times, and I don't know that influenced or impacted the licensing decision. I do know that there was a fairly consistent falling out between Nintendo and Atari games. What the ultimate rationale behind that was, I don't know that we'll ever fully know, but as far as Mr. Arakawa's dozing off with Hide, I somehow doubt that was the case. I think Hide was bigger than that.
Why has this guy got to be named Ted Hoff?
I know, isn't that terrible?
Because there is another Ted Hoff that worked at Atari. Very briefly, but...
And who is very well known
for
his role in the creation of the microprocessor.
But his name is technically Marcin.
Marcin, yep. Exactly.
I can see why he goes by Ted.
Yes.
Nakajima took an unusually aggressive stance towards Nintendo. I mean, they had to, otherwise they were going to be screwed. And Arakawa responded by taking an uncharacteristically patient approach towards Atari games. What, is he not patient?
Seems like they're always patient. I mean, that Universal suit did not end in a year. That dragged on to 1985 in the appeals. 86, yeah.
Ever since the Universal Pictures suit over Donkey Kong, Nintendo had a reputation for using the legal system to its advantage. I mean, defending themselves, In this case, however, Nintendo waited 11 months before responding to Atari's charges by lodging a suit of its own. I'm not sure they waited. I think maybe Atari didn't file the suit right or something.
It's almost responded with a suit of their own. It's almost like they took that period to do interrogatories and discovery based on the original Atari Games suit, and then once they had all the evidence they needed, filed a countersuit. I mean, that's what you do, because there was already a suit. So there was discovery, there were depositions, there were interrogatories. There were documents being...
I mean, you can technically sue right after.
No, exactly, you can. Case. But with something this huge, they would want to see everything that they could get from Atari Games first. I just think Kent is way off base saying that is weird in any way.
In November 1989, Nintendo launched a countersuit accusing Atari of patent infringement, breach of contract, unfair competition, and tortious interference with contract. I love that phrase, tortious.
Yes.
Before filing the suit, Nintendo took other measures, sending letters to retailers warning them not to carry Tengen products. Stores caught selling the games the letters warned would be subject to legal action. The strategy caught Atari off guard and proved effective.
I can't imagine Atari was in any way caught off guard, but whatever.
Yeah, you don't think that's going to be the first thing that they do?
That sounds like a standard response to a lawsuit of that type to me.
Nintendo was the most lucrative product in the toy industry at the time, and many retailers would simply collapse if Nintendo cut off their supplies. Collapse? I'm not sure about that.
That's a little dramatic, but nobody wanted to lose the Nintendo business. Right. That's fair.
Nintendo cartridges were one of the few toy products that sold steadily all year long, though a few retailers, such as Toys R Us, considered ignoring Nintendo's demands. Really, Toys R Us? Okay. Every major chain eventually removed Tengen cartridges from its shelves and refused future shipments. Caught with expensive inventory and no sales outlets, Atari asked the courts to stop Nintendo from threatening customers. Judge Fern Smith responded by enjoining both Atari and Nintendo from interfering with each other's customers. What was Atari doing, though? Both companies appealed the decision, and the injunction was lifted on both sides, opening the way for Nintendo to continue threatening retailers who stocked Tengen products. So Nintendo just won. That was it.
Yeah, because I mean, again, I'm not, even though I have a law degree, I'm not actually a lawyer. But I mean, Nintendo's alleging that the conduct was illegal, so they're allowed to defend themselves in that way. I think. I mean, kind of surprised that an injunction was granted in the first place. I think the judge was probably just upset with these squabbling children and wanted to put them both in timeout.
The court battle went much the same way, with Atari's lawyers making small gains and finding themselves in a bad position. They attempted to make the point that the data stream created by security chips during the authentication process was not protected by copyright law. On this issue, they were correct. The copyright laws that protect computer software clearly stated that while programs could be covered by a copyright, the data they produced could not. Under that interpretation, Atari had the right to copy the data stream created by 10NES. Atari also argued that Nintendo's lockout security gave the company an unfair advantage in the marketplace, and that duplicating the code was the only way to break into the market. Atari then took the case one step further, asking for information that would ensure compatibility with Nintendo consoles. The judge denied that motion. By requiring independent game developers to carefully study a particular security system and discern which program instructions are truly necessary for present compatibility, console manufacturers will have a limited period of time in which to control the market for compatible games. In this time period, some third-party game developers are likely to enter license agreements with Nintendo, particularly if they have limited resources. After a relatively short period of time, however, other developers will enter the game market with independently produced, but still compatible games. In addition, if third-party developers who enter license agreements later find the license agreements to be onerous, there still exists the option of reverse engineering the security system after the expiration of their license agreement. Thus, a fair use defense, which allows for copying for both present compatibility, balances the incentives for both the game developers and console manufacturers. The extension sought by Atari would destroy this balance by eliminating the console's manufacturer's lead time. I have no idea how good of a legal argument that is. Of course, we, very recent, the most recent case here in 2021 that has gone up against this is the Apple v. Epic case, which is being appealed right now. But it's the question of whether a platform holder can control what goes onto their platform is still something that is being adjudicated by people who don't want to play by the normal rules.
Yep.
The case came down to a few simple points. Since Atari did not dispute Nintendo's ownership of 10NES, the trial revolved around two specific questions. Was Rabbit a direct copy of 10NES? And would companies need to copy the program to compete in the market? The question of copying was solved when Nintendo showed that Atari had duplicated non-functional parts of the 10NES code. In particular, the court finds that the existence of the program elements in the Rabbit program, which serve no function other than authenticating the console, firmly establish illicit copying. Nintendo's lawyers were also able to prove that there was more than one way around the NES security system, and that Atari did not need to illegally obtain the illegally obtained reproductions of the Copyright Office to access the NES. The judge found in favor of Nintendo, but the battle with Atari was only beginning. What does this say? This point would become pivotal in later cases.
Okay.
I guess he's alluding to Galoob.
I don't know.
I don't. You know. Yeah, they able to prove that there's more than one way around the NES security system. I can almost assume that they brought in like those Color Dreams cartridges into the court and be like, "Hey, you see, you see,
You're right.
There's a way around it."
Exactly.
That might be the case. I honestly don't know. We don't have this case.
We need to get it. We will. We will.
We'll grab it in California. California. Tetris. The most notable casualty of the war between Nintendo and Atari games was the Tengen version of the game Tetris, a game that was created by Soviet mathematician Alexei Pajitnov. Is it Pajit or Pajitnov? I don't know.
I think it's Pajitnov.
Pajitnov.
But I'm not positive.
While working at the computer center of the Moscow Academy of Science, Pajitnov came up with
And while that's not strictly incorrect, a little shout out for Vadim Garmisov, who probably deserves co-credit for Tetris.
Yeah, there's a question of how much he was involved with the original, and of course, and we pretty much know that he's not going to be in the movie, which is being produced right now,
right?
Because he's been written out of the story entirely. The one thing he deserves complete credit for is getting it on IBM PC. That was him. He did that by himself, and that's the reason it spread, and that's why he is worth having as part of the story. But there's conflicting stories on whether he actually had anything to do with the original program, if he actually designed anything.
That movie's going to be so disappointing. I still think it should have been a Coen Brothers movie.
Yeah, I mean, like, I looked at the director and like, well, that's some movies you did there.
I mean, it might end up being a competent movie, who knows, but it's just gonna, I mean, most movies are full of mistakes. It's just I'm not this big of an expert on most of the movie nonfiction topics I go see movies about.
Yeah, I haven't seen any of his movies. I was just like, oh yeah, you did some movies. All right. There's no high profile in the Tetris movie coming out.
Yeah.
But it will be interesting to see. I mean, like, the guy who does Rogers looks good.
Do you think Seth Rogen will reprise his role as Donkey Kong for the Tetris movie?
Pajitnov came up with a computer game in which players organized two-dimensional geometric shapes. The blocks would fall from the top of the screen, and the players had to rotate and place them before they landed. You know, if there's one game you don't need to describe, Kent...
it's Tetris, yes. Right?
If the player organized the blocks into complete and unbroken lines as they landed, the blocks would disappear. If a line was broken, they would remain on the screen until blocks would pile on top of it. The game ended when blocks reached the top of the screen. Pajitnov developed the game on an Electronica 60, which is, I think, spelled with a K, but I think it's... I don't know, it doesn't matter because it's not
probably,
spelled that way.
But it's... Right, because it's translated from Cyrillic, alphabet. An
antiquated computer that was the Russian clone of the PDP computers made for the Department of Defense by Digital Equipment. Made for the Department of Defense?
Made for the Department of Defense? That's a dumb statement. Yeah, it was based on the PDP-11 to be specific, and that was not made for the Department of Defense. No.
They developed space on a PDP-1, PDP-11, so... He does mention it, but I don't know why you just wouldn't put it up here. But made for the Department.
Oh, hey, Vadim's here. I legitimately forgot that Vadim got a shout out, so that's good.
Yeah. Because his computer could display only alphanumeric characters, Pajitnov teamed up with Vadim Gerasimov.
Gerasimov, yeah. Gerasimov, probably, yeah.
I think in your episode you said Germisov.
Yeah, I just transposed a letter.
Gerasimov.
Yep,
A gifted young hacker with access to a PC to create a better looking interface for the game. In 1986, a friend of Pajitnov's sent a copy of Tetris to the Institute of Computer Scientists in Budapest, Hungary. Did he ever identify who the friend was? Because that guy.
I can't remember.
It was there that Robert Stein, president of the London-based computer software company Andromeda, happened to see the game.
Sometime in 1986, Robert Stein was in Hungary and saw Tetris. Just one of the pirate copies. I didn't call him pirated back then. I gave it out myself everywhere. So he feels that this is a really good game. I lost it for a second there. And approached the computer center and wanted to make a license and publish it. He had no idea what it means to deal with the Russians and with the Russian bureaucracy.
Stein contacted the Moscow Academy of Science, began negotiating with Pajitnov for the rights to Tetris. Thinking that Pajitnov had the authority to make the deal, Stein next began calling executives at large software publishers with an offer to license the game. He sold the European computer rights of Tetris to Microsoft and the American rights to Spectrum Holobyte, both backed by British publishing.
So this is, that's not exactly what he did, because he sold the rights to Microsoft. Spectrum Holobyte was owned by the Mir Group, so then they gave the rights in America to Spectrum Holobyte.
Of course, there's no need to tell all this because it's just in Game Over, Kent.
Yeah. Yes. 2 whole chapters, 2 fascinating chapters in Game Over devoted to this.
Yes, and he actually, we know in that case, he actually did dig up the court records and all that.
Yeah.
Stein had not counted on the difficulties of dealing with the Soviets, however, and granted these rights before securing them for himself. Mirrorsoft and Spectrum Holobyte released versions of Tetris in January 1988. The Soviets did not sign Stein's contract until the following month. Stein's contract specifically gave him control of the personal computer versions of Tetris created for Western markets.
He finally came to us and said, well, I want the rights, and I want those rights, I want those rights. So basically, because we promised him the PC rights, they were given to him, and we legalized our relationship at this point. But the game was on the shelf already, and I do not believe that he sold his video rights as well without having an agreement. He approached us immediately asking for all the rights, but we didn't know who the hell he was.
Then the confusion began. Spectrum Holobyte sold the Japanese computer and coin-op rights of Tetris to an entrepreneur named Hank Rogers. Note this, was this Mirrorsoft or who?
So, Spectrum and Hank Rogers, if memory serves, that was the direct relationship, okay. And that's why Spectrum came out okay in all of this with their PC version. If I'm remembering correctly, Gilman Louis told me that because they had a good relationship with Hank Rogers, Hank basically told them, don't, at the end of all this, don't worry guys, you're going to be fine. If I'm remembering correctly.
But did they offer the coin-op rights to Sega? Was that Spectrum or was that Mirrorsoft?
I'd be surprised if Spectrum was doling out coin-op rights. No, it's possible Sphere was. So,
right,
we refer to Spectrum Holobyte, but Spectrum Holobyte was actually owned by a holding company called Sphere, which was, the head of that was Jim McConaughey, who was also in charge of Mirrorsoft. So he was going, so it's possible that it was done through Sphere. But I would have to go back. I have interviewed Gilman Louis and Phil Adam at Spectrum Holobyte. I would have to go back and to the recordings again to be specific on that. But I doubt they were doling out all of these sub-rights themselves.
Well, had strong ties to Nintendo. At the same time, Mirrorsoft sold the exact same rights to Atari Games. Mirrorsoft wielded more power in the Maxwell organization, so the rights went to Atari. Yeah, or was it like Atari gave them to Sega? Or oh my god, We need some string and some post-it
There
notes.
were some. Well, and I have some of that string because I do have the Spectrum Holobyte side of the story, and there was a case where competing rights were given out. I do think that's correct. I think Spectrum Holobyte gave out the rights to Sega, and Mirrorsoft gave out the rights to Atari. Now I'm remembering. I think that is how it happened. Gilman Louis confirmed all of that stuff.
Atari in turn sold the Japanese coin-operated games rights to Sega Enterprise. This is what this says. And the Japanese console and PC rights to Rogers. So there's two conflicting things here. Like, so, yeah, the Japanese. He says, where is it?
So I believe the chain of events
Japanese
is
computer and coin-op rights of Tetris. So first of all, here's the error. The coin-op rights did not go to Rogers.
I have to listen to my Louis interview again. I do know that Spectrum Holobyte gave them out, and then Mirrorsoft gave them out, and it was a problem. That much is definitely true. But I don't think Rogers asked for the coin-op rights. I think that is a mistake.
Yeah.
He just had the computer rights. Because why the heck would Hank Rogers be asking for coin-op rights?
Right. So, yeah.
But I do think they made a deal with Sega, and then it was getting superseded by the Mirrorsoft deal, but then because Atari wasn't in Japan anyway, they were like, we don't care.
So then it says Atari and the Japanese console and PC rights to what? Like, you just said I'm so confused. Spectrum Holobyte sold the Japanese computer and console rights to Hank Rogers, and then Atari sold.
So Atari did sublicense the coin-op rights to Sega, and they did that because they really didn't care, because they licensed their product in Japan anyway. They didn't have a Japanese presence.
Okay, so that's true, but Atari did not give the console.
Yeah, I don't think Hank Rogers, but the Hank Rogers rights I don't think came through Atari. That doesn't sound right to me.
No sense at all. So yeah,
I'm
is a
pretty
really
sure,
confused paragraph here.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure what happened is, Louis went to bat for Hank Rogers and was able to get him to keep his computer rights, and because of that, when all the other right stuff went to shit and Hank Rogers ended up with all the rights, he was basically like, you guys looked after me, I'll look after you, don't worry about it. In regards to the PC stuff with Spectrum Holobyte. I think that's right.
Tactics.
I think that's right, but it's been a while. I mean, obviously I'll go over the stuff again before I put it in my own book, but it's been a while since I've done those interviews.
Yeah, I think we really do need to make a chart, because it is
well,
required.
so actually I have a
Dale!
chart, so I should pull the darn thing up. This is the one episode that I meticulously timelined before doing the episode, because I knew otherwise I'd completely screw it up. So this may bring us some insight.
Welcome, Dale.
I just have to bring this up.
We're
talking about Tetris. If Alexei comes up again, you can do your Russian accent, because mine is terrible.
I am here for sweet, sweet clicks.
There you go. Yes, you will be Alexei from now on. I could do one if I actually practiced it, but coming in cold, no, it was terrible. Let me find Tetris here.
Alex is pulling up his research.
Yeah, I'm pulling up my timeline, because my timeline is based on.
It is on the
everything.
Patreon, so I could go look at it myself.
Yeah, which episode is it?
Who amongst the TCW diehards doesn't remember the iconic Tetris episode?
Which episode was the Tetris episode?
It was a while back. It was in early.
Oh yeah, it's a long while back, but.
It is episode 23.
It was a movie, really. 23?
Yes.
Oh,
yes. Okay,
wow.
so yeah, let's peel this back a little It's...
All right.
Oh, yes, the friend's name is Victor Burajbrin
Beautiful.
was the name of the friend. I have that information. That's good. Yeah, I should have had this up sooner. So, okay. Who wants to run the game? Yeah, both were taken with the game. Contract signed with Microsoft and Spectrum Holobyte. Grant them both rights. Spectrum Holobyte, Hank Rogers.
Oh my God, that's right. Runtime, the Gordian knot that is Kent's
Okay,
Tetris
so
story.
Microsoft, not Spectrum Holobyte. Microsoft sub-licensed the arcade and console rights to Atari Games and Tengen in return for the rights to convert Atari's Blasteroids game to British computer platforms. Spectrum Holobyte...
Really, they wanted Blasteroids?
Yes. Spectrum Holobyte granted Hank Rogers computer and home console rights, not arcade rights.
Yep.
Just computer and home console. The two deals conflicted because Atari Games rights were worldwide. They basically let Rogers go ahead and keep the computer rights because they didn't care, but they did not let him keep his console rights. So, after 2 months, Rogers secures Japanese console rights to test. So, Rogers ends up getting the console rights, though, through Atari later.
Okay. So...
And Atari Games gives the Japanese coin-op rights to Sega. Spectrum Holobyte has nothing to do with that. So that's the chain of events, and Kent is, of course, incorrect.
Okay, so...
Big shocker there.
What are the things I need to fix here? So Atari did eventually give console rights to Rogers.
Atari did give the console rights to Rogers. That's correct.
Okay.
But Rogers never asked for arcade rights, and Spectrum Holobyte did not grant arcade rights to anybody. They only granted console and computer rights for Japan to Rogers. That's the one deal Spectrum
So Stein granted the arcade rights? Who granted the arcade rights?
No. Stein gave all of the rights, even the rights that he didn't actually have, to Microsoft.
Okay.
Microsoft negotiated the rights deals for coin-op. They gave those rights to Atari Games. Atari Games then sublet those rights in Japan to Sega because they didn't care. They weren't there. Atari Games had worldwide rights to everything arcade and console. Rogers was given rights in Japan to computer and console. Those two deals conflicted, but since Spectrum Holobyte was a more junior subsidiary of the whole Mir Group thing, the console deal made by Microsoft stood, and Rogers was shut out of those rights but got to keep his computer rights. And then Atari, because they weren't in Japan, Tengen wasn't in Japan anyway, Rogers went back to them and negotiated with Atari Games directly and got the console rights for Japan through Atari.
Okay, so
this is why I made a timeline, a written timeline, before I recorded this episode.
So there's your complete Tetris story part 2. Stein had not counted on the difficulties of dealing with the Soviets, however... Oh, wait, I'm on the wrong page, aren't I?
Yeah.
No, I'm not. I'm on the right page.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. Sold...
Just show me which Paganoff quote I have to get ready for here, for the love of God.
There. This is the page we were on. Now you're there.
Yeah.
Now you're there.
Okay. All right. What nobody realized was that Stein never received rights to make any of those deals. After looking over the various arrangements, Rogers realized that nobody owned the handheld rights to Tetris, so he flew to Moscow to meet with the Soviets. He had hoped to secure the rights as an agent for Nintendo. Nintendo was preparing to unveil the Game Boy, and Arakawa thought Tetris would be a perfect lead title for the new handheld game system.
According to Rogers, it was not Arakawa. Rogers' famous quote that he credits to himself is, if you want, Arakawa wanted to package Super Mario Land, and Rogers said, if you want young boys to buy the Game Boy, package Super Mario Land with it. If you want everybody to buy the Game Boy, package Tetris with it.
I'm gonna leave that as just kind of a question mark in the air, though, because I don't know which way or the other. I don't know if he actually asked Arakawa this or not.
Right.
He had hoped to secure the rights as an agent for Nintendo. Nintendo was... wait, I already said that. While Rogers was there, Soviets surprised him by offering worldwide video game rights as well. He had been under the impression that Atari and Microsoft controlled those rights, and fearing a legal battle with those companies, Rogers bought
Okay, so that's
Nintendo
kind of true. It's kind of true, but that leaves out a lot. What they surprised him with is that he showed up and unannounced and was like, "Hey, I'm the guy that's selling the console version in Japan," and then the Soviets were like, "What the actual fuck are you talking about? There are no console rights for anybody." And it was at that point, after he was like, "I did not know, I'm so sorry, here's all my money," they offered him the worldwide console rights. So I mean, he's not wrong that happened, but he leaves out a very kind of crucial part of that story there.
On March 22nd, 1988, Howard Lincoln and Minoru Arakawa signed a contract with representatives of Elektronortechnika, the Soviet agent handling the transaction, sealing the worldwide home video game rights to Tetris. Now, is that the date? Because I thought this happened all in 1989.
I have no, it definitely, let's see, I have a timeline. Let's see, it was 89.
Yeah.
Yes. It was 89. The deal was signed on March 22nd, but he has the year wrong. Couldn't even steal from Game Over, right, Kent?
Yeah. Being off by 1 year sends people down very bad rabbit holes, like that time Bear did it in his book, and I only just figured out that he got the date wrong, and now everything makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
Atari Games had begun work on the Tengen version of Tetris for the NES by that time. Mr. Ted Huff.
Who's talking? Okay. I was there when they locked up Tetris. The Tetris story was kind of an interesting one. And to this day, people believe that the Russians double-dipped. The product was in negotiation for licensing, and at virtually the same time, the product was licensed to two companies. We had manufactured Tetris and put it on the market, and in fact, it became the #1 seller on the Nintendo platform.
Two companies.
You see, the Russians didn't double dip. Stein started handing out rights like candy.
And I highly doubt it was the #1 seller for any large period of time. But
no, it wasn't out on NES long enough to do that.
On March 31st, 9 days after signing the contract in Moscow, Lincoln and Arakawa sent a fax to Hideyuki Nakajima informing him that Nintendo had secured the video game rights to Tetris. 2 weeks later, Atari Games quietly filed for a copyright for the game. Atari released its Tengen version of Tetris in May 1989. The Nintendo released its version 1 month later. The Tengen version, which was created by veteran arcade designer Ed Logg, had both single-player and two-player modes, and looked almost exactly like the arcade game. Let's see what this is. Logg.
Are we just letting him go with that drop in a copyright there?
I mean, if they did it, they did it. I mean,
you know,
we're talking about
in this case, they really thought they had the rights. I mean, they weren't being duplicitous. They really thought they had the rights.
Oh yeah, no, I realize, and I guess we could cross-reference it, but I'm too tired.
Yeah. Fair.
But I guess you would. I guess you would file for copyright on that if you were.
I don't know. It still feels kind of sketchy. Well, I guess you can copyright your version of the game. I guess
that's what they would have been copywriting is their version of the game,
which
they would have had the right to do as the presumed North American rights holder.
Logg, best known for creating arcade games Centipede, Asteroids, and Gauntlet, deserves some of the credit for Atari's coin-operated version of Tetris. He converted the code he made for Tengen NES cartridge to work in a coin-operated arcade game. What?
In the
No.
coin-operated arcade game.
But that doesn't make any sense though. The arcade game was way before the NES version.
But see what it says. I'm sure he got this straight from log. It says the Tengen Tetris cartridge was finished nearly 4 months before it was released.
But I don't like the.
I'm sure he got that straight from log because log's been interviewed for this book.
Yeah, but I am highly skeptical that this is that. No, they're not identical though. They're not identical. Yeah, this doesn't make any sense.
Where does he say it's identical?
He said that he converted the code of the Tengen NES Tetris to work in the.
Then the other two finished the game. So he's not saying. What he's saying is they used his code as a base.
I'm putting this as a question mark because I'm not. I am pretty.
I'm pretty sure that came straight from Ed Log. And
yeah,
but
But he's also.
I think it makes sense. It's just convoluted.
He also said that we finished breaking the 10 NES chip. So.
He didn't say that to Kent. I think that's probably some form of accurate.
I'm putting it.
Looks like part of the email from Log that he copied and pasted.
Yeah, how else would he know names like Greg Rivera and Norm Avalar? I mean, this is
it's completely out of nowhere.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not saying that there wasn't information given, but I'm just skeptical of the veracity of that he made the NES version and then converted it to the arcade version. Doesn't make any sense.
No, he didn't say it was convert. He said that served as the base. Yes, but it served as the base.
Because I'm pretty sure it was released like mid 1988, the arcade version. But anyways, we'll look at this later.
What's the processor in the arcade version?
I don't think it's a 6502. They didn't tend to use those at that point.
Then that would be a bit of a trick to,
you can convert code, but anyways, we're moving on from this. I'll look at this later. The Nintendo's version was a single-player game. Most reviewers agreed that Tengen had done a better job with the game, for those who could get their hands on it. Judge Smith, who handled the case concerning Atari's duplication of 10 NES, presided over the Tetris case as well. The trial hinged on determining who had legal ownership of the game. Nintendo's pedigree was obviously stronger. Nintendo had signed statements from Soviet officials confirming the sale and a note signed by Stein defining computers as PC computers with, among other things, a keyboard and a monitor. Of course, this is a whole thing that they skipped past.
Tetris was done on a 6502 hardware in the arcade.
Well, I'm still going to look at this. Recognizing that Nintendo would almost certainly prevail when the case went to trial, Judge Smith granted Nintendo's motion to force Atari to recall its cartridge. The case ended without trial, however. On November 13th, 1989, Smith canceled the trial and ruled that Nintendo owned rights to the game.
I assume what happened is Nintendo filed a motion for summary judgment, and Smith granted the motion for summary judgment. He wasn't just like, this trial is canceled. The ratings are too low.
Your Honor? Canceled, I said.
Alex, here we go.
I think to this day, anyone you talk to will certainly say that the best Tetris was the two-player Tetris that came out on Nintendo and was published by Tengen. Without a doubt, it was the best Tetris. At one point, you could look in the back of any of the gaming magazines and find people who would be willing to pay you $300 for a Tengen Tetris cartridge. There were 268,000 of them locked up, bolted, padlocked, in Milpitas on Sycamore Street. If people knew that they were $300 each and knew that there were that many of them, they probably would have picked the lock. But that was a well-kept secret in a dark room. And those cartridges were never shipped. When I left the company 2 years ago, the cartridges were still under lock and key. My understanding is that they were subsequently destroyed.
Really, they could have gray marketed those. They got lots of money.
Right. I mean, the Tengen Tetris was available for sale,
for a couple months. People have it.
No, what I mean is in, the places you call to get games, not like going down to Toys R Us to pick it up, but like the ads in magazines and
Mhm.
comic books. Tetris was one of the games listed with all the Tengen games. I remember that very clearly.
How,
And,
how common are
after
they today?
1989.
They're
Yeah.
pretty rare. It's one of the. I mean, it's not like stadium events, but it's decently rare.
Right.
I couldn't tell you exactly, but in that general vicinity.
Gotcha. We don't want to speculate in today's trading environment.
Yeah.
True enough. Of course, anyone you talk. Well, I guess he hadn't played Tetris 99 yet, so I think maybe we can excuse him this con. But at the same time, most people will just say the Game Boy version's better because it has the music. And that's all they need.
Right.
Nintendo sold more, and it's 2 players too if you have the link cable.
Very true.
Nintendo sold more than 3 million copies of its NES Tetris cartridge and more than 40 million copies of Tetris cartridges for the Game Boy. The game came packed in with the system. Yeah, that's an easy way to boost sales.
Yeah.
Pajitnov, the creator of the game, did not make any royalties from any of these sales, but his association with the game enabled him to emigrate to the United States. In 1996, all of the rights that Elorg had sold expired and reverted to Pajitnov. Hoping to help Pajitnov finally profit from the game, Hank Rogers helped him establish Tetris Company LLC. But L lowercase l lowercase c.
Yeah, but that could be a problem with the. Now that I have my
Yeah.
copy of the
I'll
Ultimate
look it up.
History of Video Games Unpacked, I can look and see
Which
what
would
it
then
looked
control
like in
all the
the.
rights to the game.
Trouble now, Stephen L. Kent.
From that time on,
Yeah.
companies that made games based on Tetris had to purchase rights from Pajitnov.
The typo is found in the original.
Beautiful. Now I'm gonna put that one, and then I'm gonna take a break just to go to the bathroom real quick. So, talk amongst yourselves.
I'm sorry you didn't get to do Pajitnov.
Okay. All right, we are back.
Can we read? Hold on, we have to read Steve Buscemi in for a Russian accent.
In the
We
Coen
might have
Brothers
something
version
there.
of the Tetris story, I mean, Steve Buscemi has to be in it because it's.
Oh my God!
You know.
Yes.
Oh boy. The fun you guys
It's like
get
a
up
Pixar
to.
Ratzenberger.
You weren't even on that whole time, so everyone will be questioning what you were saying. Anyways, we are into the next.
Well, you cut us from the stream. Oh, that's a
Oh
shame.
man.
We were providing deep. It's for the. Yeah. The Coen Brothers might have been listening, man.
That's right.
All right, carry on.
Sega Enterprises Limited versus Accolade Inc. All right, Dale, you get to read the judge.
Oh. Ordinarily, in a trademark case, a trademark holder contends that another party is misusing the holder's mark or is attempting to pass off goods or services as those of the trademark holder. The other party usually protests that the mark is not being misused, that there is no actual confusion, or that for some reason no violation has occurred. This case is different. Here, both parties agree there is misuse of the trademark. Both agree that there is an unlawful mislabeling, and both agree that confusion may result. The issue here is which party is primarily responsible.
In 1984, Bob Whitehead and Alan Miller, two of the original VCS programmers who left Atari and started Activision, founded a software company called Accolade. Accolade.
Like lemonade.
Exactly.
Accolade?
Accolade. Accolade started out as a computer game company, but when Sega released the Genesis in 1989, Whitehead and Miller decided to convert some of their PC titles to work on the new console. They had licensed approximately... Yeah. By the way, Alex, you're not allowed to read for Alan Miller because you haven't interviewed him. Just to be a dick to Alex.
Well, and here's something. By 1989, Whitehead was really not making any decisions at the company anymore. So, he wasn't part of making that decision.
Well, they said decided to convert some of their PC titles. So if he was involved in the conversion...
Whitehead was gone at that point. He was essentially gone. He came back a little later to run product development when they got in trouble. But by '89, he was basically not involved anymore with the company.
Was he actually gone in 1989, or just effectively?
It's complicated.
Okay.
But he was not involved in any, and and at this point, Miller, even though he wanted to be the CEO, wasn't the CEO. They had a CEO. His name was Alan Epstein, whom I've interviewed.
Yes, indeed.
Whitehead.
That
Whitehead.
They had licensed approximately 30 other companies, and the licensing deal, it turns out, is a very expensive deal. One pays them between $10 to $15 per cartridge on top of the real hardware manufacturing costs, so it about doubles the cost of goods to the independent publisher. It winds up with the consumer generally paying a lot more for the cartridge, but that's the licensing deal. And they have a right to establish whatever they consider to be a failed deal.
Okay, Alan Miller, hold on. This isn't an A. He's giving his point of view. But if that licensing deal wasn't there and Nintendo wasn't taking that money, the console company would have taken that money. Everyone was going to charge what the market could bear on Nintendo cartridges and Sega cartridges.
We chose not to accept the licensing deal and instead to independently study the system, figure out how to do games for it, and then publish several games for the system. Mike Lorenzen led a team of Accolade engineers that purchased a Genesis console and 3 game cartridges, then wired the console so that they could make printouts of the executable code of the games. They believed each game's code to... They compared each game's code to locate identical chains, believing all of the games would use the same programming instructions to disable any security locks Sega placed in the Genesis. They use this information to create a development manual for making Genesis games.
So Dale said that he'd be in and out, and when he's muted, he won't be able to do it. According to Accolade, at this stage, it did not copy Sega's programs, but relied on the information concerning interface specifications for the Genesis that was contained in its development manual. Accolade maintains that with the exception of the interface specifications, none of the code in its games is derived in any way from its examination of Sega's code.
Accolade released Ishido, its first Genesis game in 1990. Previously released as a Macintosh and PC computer game, Ishido was a strategy board game in the same vein as Go. Does it have the same board? I honestly don't know.
No, isn't it? Isn't it more of a? We're stopping here because no, it's not Go, and I think it's more like Mahjong in the sense that it's matching, because it was, Brad Freger wanted to do it as a follow-up, kind of similar.
Yeah, this is not like Go. This makes no sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
completely different kind of game.
Yeah.
Like Nintendo, Sega created security systems in its consoles to guard against software pirates and unlicensed publishers. In 1990, the company unveiled Genesis 3, a slightly Genesis 3? Is that when they put out that model? Nah, I think that was much later.
I think these are internal revisions. He's getting this from the court case. This
Okay.
isn't like the Genesis 3 that was released by Majesco in 1998 or whatever. This is like an internal revision.
Unveiled Genesis 3.
That's for World Choice by Kent, but you'll see there's a quote coming up from the case after that. So,
a slightly modified version of the Genesis console that included an externally developed security system called the Trademark Security System.
That's the judge again?
Yeah.
The most recent version of the Genesis 3, incorporates the licensed TMSS. When a game cartridge is inserted, the microprocessor contained in the Genesis 3 searches the program for 4 bytes of data consisting of the letters S, E, G, A, the TMSS initialization code. If Genesis 3 finds the TMSS initialization code in the right location, the game is rendered compatible and will operate on the console. In such case, the TMSS initialization code then prompts a visual display for approximately 3 seconds, which reads, "Produced by or under license from Sega Enterprises Limited," the Sega message.
In quotes. Which means it was used throughout the rest of the decision to explain something.
Yes.
With the Genesis 3, Sega created a double security gate. To make unlicensed cartridges, software publishers had to discover how to unlock the system, then face charges of misrepresentation since the TMSS authentication process triggered the licensing message. Although all officially licensed games were Genesis 3 compatible, Ishido would not operate on the new console. Accolade did not learn about this development, however, until the Winter Consumer Electronics Show in January 1991, when Sega did a demonstration with the new version of the Genesis screened the Ishido cartridge, in which the new version of the Genesis screened the Ishido cartridge.
Screened as in just the same way you screen calls, screened as in kept out.
By this time, the company was preparing 5 games for release. Caught in a vulnerable situation, Accolade engineers scrambled to discover what piece of code the licensed cartridges used to satisfy TMSS. They found their answer in a tiny segment of the power-up sequence of the game code that had no identifiable function. Lorenzen noticed that it during his first round of reverse engineering and even sent a memo to Miller. It is possible that some future Sega peripheral device might require it for proper initialization. That code sequence was added to the game's Star Control, Hardball, Turrican, and Might Ditka Power Football before Accolade put them on the market. Accolade released a 5th game, Onslaught, as well, but the game code did not have the TMSS file in the correct location and would not run on Genesis 3 consoles. On October 31st, 1991, Sega Enterprises filed suit against Accolade, accusing the company of trademark infringement and unfair competition. 1 month later, Sega added copyright infringement to its charges. Accolade lodged a counterclaim accusing Sega of false designation of origin and unfair competition. Among other things, the counterclaim stated that Sega injured Accolade's reputation by falsely attributing itself as the source of the unlicensed games. The case was supposed to be heard by Judge Robert F. Peckham, a judge who had tried similar cases and whose views were thought to be sympathetic towards entrepreneurs. The case was originally assigned to a federal judge here in San Francisco named Peckham, with whom we had some familiarity. We had been the plaintiff in a copyright infringement case and knew his thoughts on copyright process and intellectual property laws in general associated with computer technology. We felt very comfortable with having him as a judge. Unfortunately, he had a heart attack early on in the case, and the case had to be reassigned. We were reassigned to a brand new federal judge named Barbara Clawfield, and she was a disaster. Hope you never have to sit in front of Barbara Clawfield, Miller. When the two sides met in court, Sega asked Judge Caulfield to bar Accolade from manufacturing Genesis...
Dale's back. I did my best to continue the judge in the same vein as you had originally represented him.
It was great. Sega asked Judge Caulfield to bar Accolade from manufacturing Genesis-compatible games, and for Accolade to abandon future attempts to reverse engineer Genesis technology. I'm not sure you can bar someone from reverse engineering, but... you know. For its part, Accolade asked the court to stop Sega from manufacturing or selling Genesis 3 consoles. Okay, that was a tall claim there. Sega began the case by establishing that Accolade's games contained illegal reproductions and adaptations of Sega Enterprises Limited's copyrighted material. Accolade defended its position by appealing the fair use doctrine. The criteria to be considered in determining...
Well, is this a different judge?
Caulfield.
Okay, that's Caulfield.
Yeah.
Okay.
The criteria to be considered in determining whether a particular use is fair use include the purpose and characteristic of the use, including whether such use is of commercial nature or for non-profit or educational purposes, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole, and the effect of the use upon potential market for or value of the copyrighted work.
I hate to break it to you, Ethan, but I'm not sure this stream is passing the fair use test as put forth by Judge Barbara Caulfield.
It's educational. It's educational. Okay?
That's one prong of the test. It's not the only prong of the test.
Hey, this is the reason I didn't tweet it out before. Whatever. We're fine. In Judge Caulfield's decision, she stated that fair use doctrine offered Accolade no protection. Since Accolade was a game manufacturer, the Genesis-compatible games were clearly made for financial gain. Ooh, such a suspicious use. They would compete with Sega licensed games in the marketplace, and she felt that they might indeed diminish the value of Sega's copyrighted work. Accolade's game cartridges compete directly with those of SEL, Judge Caulfield's notation for Sega Enterprises Limited, which has likely lost sales as a result of Accolade's copying. In addition, since SEL's disassembled code is an unpublished work, it is subject to a narrower scope of fair use.
Pretty sure SEL itself has called itself SEL.
Yeah.
But whatever.
As to charges of trademark infringement, Judge Caulfield sided with Sega. In her decision, she pointed out that Accolade copied the SEGA code that triggered the Sega logo and licensing message. Accolade's lawyers explained there was no way of knowing that the TMSS code would bring up the trademark and licensing message when the code was added to the games. Accolade engineers had simply recognized a small file could be found in the games and that worked on the new console and was not present on games that were screened out. In her decision, Judge Caulfield dismissed this argument. Accolade boldly inserted SEL's code into games before SEL released the Genesis 3 into the marketplace, and thus, without fully realizing the consequences, Accolade took that risk, and cannot now shift their responsibility to SEL or SOA, Sega of America. I don't follow this argument.
I think that what they were saying is it wasn't their fault because when they first released the games, that code didn't cause anything to happen. And so they weren't willfully disparaging the mark because it was an action of Sega later that caused the mark disparagement to happen rather than their actions.
Yeah, but
and what the judge is saying in dismissing that argument is, guys, you were doing something that was kind of improper, so you were taking the risk that at some point you were going to get caught. Is basically what it comes down.
I mean,
to.
they did it legitimately, but this is gonna get further into the.
Well, and that's why they argued that they shouldn't be. That's why at the beginning the quote from the judge was about they both agree that it's trademark disparagement, but what they're disagreeing on and whose fault it is. And Sega's saying it's Accolade's fault for copying the code, but Accolade's saying it's Sega's fault because when they copied the code, it did not create a trademark disparagement, and so they were not doing it willfully, and there was no intent, and it's Sega's own fault for changing their system. That's what the case hinged on.
Yeah, but the appeals case that we're going to get into, but I think this original case more rested on the copyright aspect, not the trademark aspect. But I don't know. That's not clear in this summation.
Mm-hmm. The appellate court couldn't have ruled on any matters that were not brought before the trial court. So if the appellate court was ruling on trademark stuff, then that is stuff that was ruled on in the original case.
Okay. Accolade's lawyers argued that Genesis 3 would not read a game unless it contained the TMSS code, and by definition, the code would trigger the trademark messages. This argument, however, was severely weakened when a Sega engineer named Takeshi Nagashima was called to testify. What did this guy work on? Go Moby Games him for me. Nagashima claimed...
My guess is he worked on the TMSS code in the Genesis hardware.
Nagashima claimed that competitors would create games that would work on Genesis 3 without the TMSS code. He then produced 2 cartridges that did not have the code. When he demonstrated them before the court, they ran without displaying SEGA or the licensing message. Sega offered the cartridges for inspection by Accolade's defense team, but refused to allow Accolade engineers to inspect the cartridge or to reveal how the code had been modified.
Okay, I'm not finding anything that doesn't link back to the case. I'm not finding his name except as a link back to the case. But we've got to just briefly pause here and see how this is rendered in service games, The Rise and Fall of Sega, in its very fanboyish way. Sega had every right to believe it would win. It had wowed Judge Caulfield with a demonstration by Sega engineer Takeshi Nagashima of how to make a Genesis game that would not trip the TMSS or make use of the code. They had denied Accolade's demand to examine Nagashima's efforts, and Judge Caulfield had sided with them. Let's see. But I love it. They wowed. Like, wowza! What magic is this that has been...
This trial is cancelled!
This trial is cancelled! We're taking Nagashima to series! Yeah, I only see his name. I mean, I only searched like the first few hits, but his name is basically only coming up in conjunction with the Accolade case.
Oh boy, service games.
So he's probably a system. So right.
I mean, that would be even worse in terms of correcting things. I mean, the first.
Oh god.
I've just kind of jumped back into it occasionally, but like the first chapter is so bad.
It's so terrible.
It's oh my god.
The whole book is a fanboy.
Oh my goodness.
Service
I remember I grabbed that excitedly on Audible one time.
Oh no.
It is.
I didn't even and I was like desperate for stuff, and I don't think I got. I think I tried it a couple times.
It is so weeb. It is the weeb history of Sega.
The shitty thing was, I was like, this was even before, I don't know, this is around the time that maybe even before you had put out some of the Sega podcasts or whatever.
Yeah, might have
Oh,
been.
early Sega stuff. And I was like, oh, there's no, what? Wait, what do you mean? Or no, it was just because I was like, oh, this will complement this crazy early Sega story is awesome. Surely this will go service games. And like the first chapter was, yeah, it was insane.
And then the whole middle section is how Sega only failed because of the evil, illegal Nintendo monopoly.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, it is entirely it is the common narrative, and there's just it focuses
It's the
entirely
common narrative
on the consumer.
dialed up to 11 is the problem.
Yeah,
It's
we'll
so
look at this.
fanboyish.
Yeah, we'll look at this sometime, but let us
Oh,
continue.
God.
Let's get us through
we
this
can't
chapter.
read the whole thing because that thing makes
we'll just skip around on that, but we'll do it later.
Yeah.
All right. On April 3rd, 1992, Judge Caulfield ruled in favor of Sega and enjoined Accolade from disassembling, translating, converting, or adapting the codes in Sega's games. She also ordered Accolade to stop manufacturing, distributing, or developing Genesis-compatible products. The decision meant that Accolade, a relatively small company, was stuck with thousands of worthless cartridges. 6 days later, at Sega's request, Judge Caulfield added an order that Accolade recall all Genesis-compatible programs within 10 business days. Though the recall was quickly repealed, the rest of Caulfield's injunction remained in effect for several months.
Okay, you repeal laws. You don't repeal injunctions. It was rescinded.
Yeah.
You don't.
This injunction is cancelled.
This trial is repealed.
She imposed an injunction against Accolade from doing any work at all with Sega cartridges. We could not sell the cartridges we had developed. We had to immediately stop development on all our Sega-related products. This was just terrible. Just to fight the injunction, we had to pay at least $500,000 in legal fees, and the commercial damage associated with this injunction ultimately proved to be somewhere around $15 to $25 million to our company.
This was basically the end of Accolade. I mean, Accolade lasted for a few more years, but they had to sell out to new people and get venture funding because this basically killed them, this case.
But you're saying Bubsy didn't save them? Is that what you're trying to say?
No.
Nice.
She bought Sega's argument that it was impermissible to study computer programs and figure out how they worked, and in addition, to bring out competitive software.
That's not what she ruled on. She ruled that they disparaged the trademark. I mean, it's very different.
This was a fundamental step backward from the way that the product development had always been done in the Valley and in general throughout the world. Accolade appealed the decision, and the case went before Judge Stephen Reinhardt in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on July 20th, 1992. Reinhardt, ready for duty. No, nobody play over.
Well, we're not quite there yet.
I know.
You have to finish the sentence. The paragraph.
But I'm comparing him to Reinhardt in Overwatch. That was a joke.
Oh, yes. I get it now. I thought you were trying to get Dale to read. That's why. I missed the larger joke.
Just in a sec. Judge Reinhardt interpreted the fair use doctrine differently than Judge Caulfield. He understood the doctrine to suggest that there is no other means of understanding how a system works when a legitimate reason exists for needing to gain that understanding. Reverse engineering was indeed a fair use of copyrighted technology. He applied a similar approach towards the false trademark message. Dale.
What the hell's an Overwatch?
You don't need to know.
Am I going? Are we German on this guy? Is this Reinhardt?
This is the guy that you opened the chapter with.
I was going for some like Caulfield cousin Vinny. The question is whether the computer manufacturer may enjoin competing cartridge manufacturers from gaining access to its computers through the use of the code on the grounds that such use will result in the display of a false trademark. This has to be from like from the summary judgment, right?
Yeah.
Again, our holding is based on the public policies underlying the statute. We hold that when there is no other method of access to the computer that is known or readily available to rival cartridge manufacturers, the use of the initialization code does not violate the Act, even though that use triggers a misleading trademark display.
Yeah, all he's doing is
I must
pulling
have some
from.
huge lag going on here.
Yeah, we've been getting that. He's pulling from the decision, like the thing
Right.
that's written up
Yeah.
in legal journals. That's all of his stuff comes from the decision.
I'm trying to imagine the judge like saying this in a block quote interview to Ken. No. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, no. Judge Reinhardt
bastard, isn't he?
noted that the TMSS file, which contains somewhere between 20 to 25 bytes of data, was minuscule when compared to the 500,000 or 1,500,000 bytes of data contained in the entire game. The data in the games, according to Reinhardt, were overwhelmingly original and deserved to compete in a free market. This, he felt, was a benefit to the public.
I feel like we should have gone like Clink on this guy. There is no basis for assuming that Accolade's Ishido has significantly affected the market for Sega's Altered Beast. I can't believe as a sitting judge that I'm writing these words, since a consumer might easily purchase both. Nor does it seem unlikely. I went to law school for 7 consumer particularly interested in sports might purchase both Accolade's Mike Ditka Power Football and Sega's Joe Montana Football. Particularly if the games are, as Accolade contends, not substantially similar. Shout out to you, Judge Reinhardt.
Salute to you. Sega's attorneys defended the original decision by pointing out that their client had invested time and capital designing and manufacturing the Genesis. Oh, those poor big corporations. Even after the Genesis shipped, Sega continued spending millions of dollars marketing it. They characterize Accolade as a free rider, benefiting from the time and investment. Reinhardt dismissed this argument, however, as the sweat of the brow rationale for copyright protection. He was also unimpressed with Nagashima's demonstration of the game cartridge that initialized...
He was not wowed. He was not wowed.
He was unimpressed.
Unwowed.
Of course, he was only, I think it's because he was only, he could only see the transcripts. It's not like they redid the demonstration for him at the appellate level. So it probably lost something on the page.
That initialized Genesis 3 without activating the trademark signals. Reinhardt stated that, at most, the Nagashima affidavit establishes that an individual familiar with the operation of TMSS can discover a way to engineer around it.
Yeah, I mean, I did think that was a pretty weak argument. It's like, look, our guy who knows the intricate details of how every part of the system works can figure out how to not do it. Why can't these guys?
Just as Judge Caulfield...
It's like saying Einstein can understand this theory of the special theory of relativity. Why can't you?
Just as Judge Caulfield had said that Accolade took a risk in adding the TMSS code and could not be excused by claiming it, it did not know that using the code would result in a trademark abuse. Judge Reinhardt now held Sega responsible for attaching its trademark to an unlicensed game.
Oh.
Sega knowingly risked 2 significant consequences: the false labeling of some competitors' products and the discouraging of other competitors from manufacturing Genesis-compatible games. Under the Latham Act, which I hope I pronounced properly in print, the former conduct, at least, is clearly unlawful.
I mean, I do agree with the appellate decision in this case. I mean, the trial judge clearly got this wrong, because Accolade didn't know they were violating a trademark. It really feels like it got you. It's like, haha. Because I mean, so the appellate court got this right.
Yeah, I mean, the argument you probably could make is that they still, whether or not it's duplicitous or not, but they grabbed, new cartridges and examined the code in anticipation of knowing that there was going to be a change of some sort.
Right, but I think the argument basically comes down to, it's like, assuming that so reverse engineering is legal if you do it in the proper way.
Right.
So what this is basically saying is that you can't sneak your trademark into something and then say, aha, look, they're misusing our trademark when they've done something legal to access that trademark. It's basically saying, okay, guys, Sega, you knew someone might do illegal reverse engineering, so you knew that if someone legally reverse engineered, they'd be using your trademark, so you've basically acquiesced to this happening. You can't then turn around and say they're doing something to disparage your trademark.
Though he did not completely absolve Accolade of all wrongdoing, Judge Reinhardt struck down the injunctions handed down by Judge Caulfield. The immediate ramifications of Judge Reinhardt's rulings were short-lived. Within a year of the trial, Accolade released a basketball game titled Charles Barkley's Shut Up and Jam, which has recently been released without Charles Barkley licensing, and that is...
So now it's just called Shut Up and Jam?
Well, we talked about this in the VGHF Discord. They took a stock photo of some guy and replaced him in for Charles Barkley.
Oh no!
Yeah, it looks absolutely terrible.
I missed that one.
As an official Sega licensee, the long-term ramifications of the case were significant. However, Sega Enterprises v. Accolade has been cited in nearly every video game trial involving reverse engineering of unlicensed products since 1993.
It is a landmark case, which means that even if the court starts trashing cases like the New York court did, this is probably one of the cases that would be saved for preservation in the future, because it is a landmark.
The states of NY and MD versus Nintendo of America. Well, it wasn't just them, but we'll probably get into that in a sec.
Yeah.
In 1988, Nintendo announced that there was a worldwide shortage of ROM chips used in Famicom and NES game cartridges. Yeah, this is the real reason Tengen got pissed, because they
didn't
wanted
get the allotments they wanted.
yeah, and they were like, we have an alternative source, and Nintendo was like, no, we won't allow you to use this alternative source. Yeah. That was the final straw.
This was a hugely complex situation because there was a global RAM shortage caused by stuff between the US and Japan, and then as Japan was trying to catch up on RAM, there was a ROM shortage. It was a strange time for memory, just like right now is a strange time.
For graphics cards, mostly. Memory
well, right, but it's the processors. You know, it's the microprocessors, not the memories, but it's still chips that are short.
All publishers, Nintendo included, would be given chip allotments that averaged approximately 25% of their original orders. This development had a two-edged effect. Many company executives complained that they were not able to sell as many games as they hoped. On the other hand, the shortage ensured that nearly every cartridge that was manufactured that year got sold. Customers seemed to purchase anything they could find as long as it carried the label Nintendo.
Overall, our licensees enjoyed the shortage because everything they produced got sold. But everybody wanted to have a little more than allocated.
Some licensees simply accepted the shortage, while others accused Nintendo of purposely inventing the shortage in an effort to further control the market. Hide Nakajima of Atari Games accused Nintendo of unfair competitive practices. Other non-related companies complaints were leveled against Nintendo as well. In a 1989 case, the Trammels accused Nintendo of shutting Atari Corporation out of the marketplace and filed a $500 million suit. In another suit filed in 1991, Nintendo found itself in court against the attorneys general of all 50 states and the District of Columbia. Well, then I actually don't know what this case is about. It's not about that one. So what is this case?
1991? Isn't that
yeah, that's
late?
Yeah, I think it's earlier than that.
Yeah. And when did the attorneys general announce that they were going to look into Nintendo? December 7th.
That's the day after my birthday.
I don't think that just happened to be the day everyone was free to meet up for the press conference.
Oh, yes. Japanophobia. The attorneys general accused Nintendo of a variety of offenses that seem to borrow from all the suits that have been filed against Nintendo. They accused the company of price fixing, shutting out competitors, over-regulating licensees, and bullying retailers. New York Attorney General Robert Adams, who led the investigation and ensuing case, said Nintendo threatened to slow down or cut off supplies to retailers who lowered the prices of games as little as 6 cents. I mean, I could get 5 cents, but 6 cents might be a little bit over the line, but you know.
One toke over the line.
When the case finally went before Judge Sweet, the same New York judge who presided over the Universal Studios / MCA v. Nintendo, it focused mostly on allegations of price fixing and ended in a settlement. And what was that settlement? He's about to get into it.
Couponing. I know.
The results of the case are almost humorous.
I got to agree with Kent on that one.
On October 17th, 1991, Judge Sweet approved a rather absurd settlement in which Nintendo agreed to mail coupons giving customers who had purchased NES systems between June 1st, 1988 and December 31st, 1990 a $5 discount on the purchase of their next game cartridge. I do not understand why these two dates. It does not make any sense. That should have been extended to, if you ever did, if you still had a receipt. I assume you still needed, a receipt, a proof of purchase, basically.
I'm assuming it has to do with the fact, either two things, and I don't know if either of these are true, but it's either that was the only period of time the attorneys general could prove that price fixing was going on. If they couldn't prove there was price fixing before that date, then there'd be no harm to remedy. Or maybe there was some kind of statute of limitations thing where they could only adjudicate over a period going back a certain amount of time.
Right. I would presume the latter, just because, I don't know, I've seen indemnities on companies that go back further than 2.5 years. So.
What was?
Yep.
Do we know the
or a year now.
terms and conditions that apply to this at the time?
I mean,
Did they, as a consumer, would I actually have had to have had my receipt?
I mean, that's what I presume, but you can find these online. You can find people selling these coupons.
I don't know. I don't know how computerized things were back then. I mean, Nintendo was certainly cutting edge on computerizing things. It could have been tied to serial numbers or something too. Like when I had to send my Xbox back for not a Red Ring issue, but a similar issue. I didn't have to show a receipt to prove it was under warranty because they had the serial number and they knew when that console was sold.
I just wondered, in addition to getting this cupcake settlement, difficult they then in turn had to structure the refund for for the customer. So we know that.
I'm pretty sure you had to you needed the physical coupon, and I think you had to mail in for it.
Yeah, I wish I could remember, because my NES was definitely bought in that time period.
Right.
I think I vaguely, and I don't think it's a false memory, I think I vaguely remember something about being aware of the $5 coupon, probably because they, announced it because they had to or whatever. But I don't recall if we ever actually tried to get the coupon or if we just got a coupon mailed to us or what.
Right, yeah.
Because I bought I don't remember exactly when I bought my NES, but I think it was 1989 when I got my NES.
Right, and I mean, they were flinging these out as promotional.
Exactly. It's like, okay, fine.
$5, yeah.
$5 off.
So
okay.
I'm pretty sure that there are some people at the time
frozen yogurt
who probably reported on how you got these and everything, but I just don't know right off.
And the Video Game History Time Machine not too long ago covered an interesting case of an unlicensed company that told people to use their $5 coupons with them, and if they did so, they would send the $5 discount to a charitable organization.
Nice.
Yeah, I think that was that offshoot of Color Dreams, like American something games.
Right, I think it was.
yeah.
But yeah, that was in the video game history time machine not that long ago.
Yeah, and I correct, like, Carl got the period wrong, and so I corrected him after reading the receipt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what I do. I'm the Department of Corrections.
Exactly.
To make sure that the people who may have purchased the consoles got the message, Nintendo agreed to run advertisements in TV Guide, USA Today, 4 video game magazines, and 800 newspapers. According to the terms of
I probably saw it in Nintendo Power. I probably
Yeah.
did. They
Yeah.
probably ran it in Nintendo Power.
I've seen, like, the newspaper advertisements and stuff. So yeah, it was out there.
Yep. Because I vaguely remember their $5 coupon program, but I can't for the life of me remember if it's something that, like, my family took part in or not.
According to the terms of the agreement, Nintendo would have to make up the difference if coupon sales added up to less than $5 million in discounts. Nintendo also agreed to pay the states and District of Columbia $1.75 million for their administrative costs and $3 million for other uses.
Which they probably just filed under marketing budget.
Go ahead, Alex.
Nintendo will pay $3 million to the Attorneys General for use at the state's option for one of the following purposes: antitrust enforcement, deposit into a state antitrust revolving fund, defraying the costs of experts used in multi-state antitrust investigations, benefiting those unidentified consumers for whose benefit the settlement was entered, or payment into a state's treasury.
In an article titled, "Please, Brer Fox,
that last one.
Well, I think that's the part about what they had, the legal.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and anything left over on the state's treasury.
Right.
In an article titled, "Please, Brer Fox, don't throw me in the briar patch," Forbes described the settlement as less than punishing for Nintendo. The deal Nintendo cut to settle antitrust complaints by the Federal Trade Commission in some states turns out to be another shrewd move by the Japanese video game manufacturer. Nintendo agreed to mail 5 million $5 coupons good on Nintendo cartridges. Wait, no, wasn't it the add-up had to be 5 million. So, I mean, this is...
Some shrewd dude.
No, they agreed to mail 5 million $5 coupons.
But if the
I
receipts
think.
were less than
Yeah.
5, okay.
Right, exactly. Then they would have to make up the difference.
Plus, pat myself on the back letters from some local attorney generals. That's some punishment. Nintendo had just put out a new 16-bit machine on the market, but the coupons are only good for the old 8-bit cartridges. So the deal helps clear inventory, as well as brings in lookers for the more powerful new sets. Please, Brer Attorney General.
I just want to point out, because I'm a language nerd, and that's one of those things that the Forbes article got it wrong and Kent got it right. It is attorneys general. It is not attorney generals. Because general is an adjective essentially modifying the term attorney. So the noun is attorney, not attorney general.
The FTC investigation may not have resulted in a large punitive settlement, but it served notice to Nintendo of America and its parent company in Japan that more investigations could follow if complaints continued. Though there is no proof that the company executives made this decision because of the lawsuit, in October 1990, Nintendo announced its licensees were free to manufacture their own cartridges and to publish games on competitors' consoles.
Okay, so there's some problems there. First of all, they did not authorize everybody to manufacture their own cartridges. They authorized some of their bigger partners to do their own manufacturing. Let me...
I know Acclaim was one of them.
Acclaim was one of them, and I've got trying to think if there's anything else I need to add to that. I'm looking up something. I want to make sure his dates are right. I mean, they may well be, but I'm not saying I think they're wrong. It's just, it's Ken.
Yep. Gotta put him in line.
Okay. And this is why we look. Firm says its first U.S. Nintendo cartridge maker, the Seattle Times, Tuesday, August 20th, 1991. Let's see. Yes.
What does it say?
Yes, these were the first licensed. This was a claim, and they were the first licensed by Nintendo made by a company other than the Japanese parent. Claims that it's scheduled to produce a second NES-compatible title in September. So it was. This is why I checked Kent. I knew I had an article when Acclaim got it, so that's why I went to look.
Okay. All right, this is Howard Lincoln.
In about, I think it was 1989 or 1990, we made a business decision that we did not need the exclusivity clause. Now, it's true we were in litigation with Atari Corp. We were in litigation with Tengen, and the FTC was moseying around. But we made a decision that we would no longer require the exclusivity clause. We would no longer enforce it, and we would not put it into any new agreements. Those clauses, from our point of view and from our lawyer's point of view, were perfectly legal under the antitrust laws. It was determined to be that way by a jury and by multiple courts, including a court of appeals, in the various litigations that we had.
Yeah, you read that language, and it seems...
Nintendo changes all of their restrictive practices right when all the lawsuits and investigations
And, you know, he doesn't
try... It's a complete coincidence!
And he tries to put it, like, he doesn't even try to put it in altruistic terms. So, you know, it could well be, even if you believe you're on legal good footing, you could be like, you know, we can continue to be challenged on this legally. I'm
pretty sure this happened because they were 100% positive they were losing the Atari Corp case. And so they wanted to be proactive and get that stuff straightened out before the verdict came down, probably as a way of looking a little better, like if it came time to set punitive damages or something like that, it could look like they were already trying to change their ways or something. Because everybody thought they were going to lose that case. And then they didn't.
And hopefully we'll learn more about it when eventually we get to the California.
Even if I can't get to the court case for some reason, the trial transcript is at Stanford, and I so want to read that.
Yes, we are all waiting with bated breath because everybody was deposed, everybody, and then they were put on the stand too.
Everybody, Yamauchi himself was on the stand. The presidents or American representatives of basically every third party was on the stand. Atari was there, Sega was there, everybody was there.
Electronic Arts.
The most ambitious crossover event.
It was.
It really it was.
Original.
And then the judge canceled it.
This is what inspired Smash Brothers.
Right.
Exactly.
This was the Smash Brothers of the litigation, of the video game litigation world.
In 1990, Louis Galoob Toys obtained the U.S. manufacturing rights to a device called Game Mage that enabled players to access hidden codes that designers placed in games as Easter eggs. What? Access hidden... What? Okay, that's kind of strange.
Yeah, that's not it at all. It's like a hex editor. It edits memory to change game states. It is not accessing hidden codes. It's a hex editor!
Yeah.
It changes values in memory.
I mean, you could technically, you could put in a Game Genie code to do the Konami code for you, but
Right, yeah, but that's because it's changing the same values in memory that the Konami code is changing.
Right. Releasing
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard,
Yeah,
Kent.
that's weird. Releasing the product in the United States as Game Genie, Galoob packaged the Game Enhancer with a programming manual containing codes for hundreds of games. Through Game Genie, players could enter up to 3 codes at one time. Codes could be that made games easier or gave the player extra lives. The game Contra, for instance, allowed players to give their soldiers powerful weapons or set up the game so that the enemy soldiers did not shoot their weapons. The codes for Legend of Zelda could give players endless supplies of bombs, let them purchase items in the game for free, and make Link, the hero of the game, invincible.
Also, I don't think it was ever called Game Mage.
I think there was,
I'm looking at something for the Super Nintendo called the Game Mage, copyright by Top Game and Company Limited, made in Taiwan.
I'll put that as a question mark, because I remember it did have an earlier name. I just can't remember if it's Game Mage or not.
Yeah, but I don't think it was Game Mage.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, I'll look this up.
Because the only references online I'm seeing to a Game Mage are a knockoff, a Taiwanese knockoff called Game Mage.
We'll check it later. Spokespeople for Galoob said that Game Genie added new life to games, but Nintendo saw it as a threat and notified the toy manufacturer that the device infringed on copyrighted material. Galoob took Nintendo to court to ask for a declaration that Game Genie did not infringe on its protected material. It also tried to pacify Nintendo by offering to license the product through the company. The offer was declined. I'm pretty sure they did that before the litigation. I think, I guess Galoob went to the... Yeah, I know some people have done videos on this and stuff, and they seem to have good dates. But, this is a very condensed telling of this one. In June 1990, Nintendo applied for an injunction to bar the toy manufacturer from distributing Game Genie. In a preliminary hearing, Judge Robert W. Schnack? Schnack? That's what it looks like to me.
Schnack. Yes.
Granted Nintendo's request on the likelihood that Nintendo could win the case. In April 1991, the case went to court before Fern Smith, the same judge that had presided over Atari Games Corporation v. Nintendo of America, and was still presiding over it, actually, because they kept appealing it until, 1992. Or not appealing, but, there were separate cases. Anyways.
Right.
Yeah, it was still going on in 1991, I know that. Judge Smith's interpretation of the fair use doctrine would prove central to both Nintendo's and Galoob's case. Nintendo claimed that Game Genie was a derivative work. It did not play original games, rather it altered copyrighted work of other companies. Nintendo's lawyers compared it to the unauthorized speed-up kits that were used to enhance arcade games. They referred to the case Midway Manufacturing v. Arctic, not Arctic.
Yeah, it's Arctic.
International, in which a judge barred a company called Arctic from selling chips that accelerated the arcade version Galaxian of.
Yes.
There's a missing.
Also, I'd just like to say thank you very much for referencing the company a second time, so we knew that it wasn't just a typo, and that you literally did not know. Oh, there's a third one!
In the Arctic case, arcade owners replaced original chips with new ones that incorporated Namco's original programming along with new code. A more accurate comparison would have been Atari Games v. General Computer, since the chips General Computer created to enhance Missile Command were used to enhance Atari's chips and modified rather than borrowed the original code. But that case never went anywhere, so it's...
Right.
There is no decision to draw on. So you have to actually, point it to a comparison. And there were other ones, too. There was another one. It wasn't Arctic. It was one of those Hong Kong companies. I can't remember, but... Hello, Dale. Welcome back.
Oh, hi.
Yeah. Judge Smith, however, disagreed with Nintendo's argument, citing that Game Genie did not physically incorporate portions of any copyrighted works, and that it in no way diminished the game market. One interesting question that emerged in this case was whether Galoob was in fact infringing on Nintendo's copyrights, or whether the real perpetrators would be the consumers using the device. The argument suggested that Game Genie was simply an adapter to which customers attached a game cartridge. The decisive factor in the case, however, was that Nintendo's lawyers could not demonstrate to Judge Smith's satisfaction how Game Genie impacted their client's business.
You did Smith before, didn't you?
Did I do Smith? I can't remember. Whatever, I'll do it.
I-
Nintendo has failed to show any harm to the present market for its copyrighted games, and has failed to establish the reasonable likelihood of a potential market for slightly altered versions of games at
Yeah,
suit.
Nintendo's, I mean, he doesn't go into it here, but Nintendo's argument basically was, a game is tuned to a certain challenge level and is tuned that the average player will take X amount of time to beat it, so they get their value out of it. And if somebody goes and cheats with a Game Genie, then they'll get through it quickly, they'll see everything, and then they'll be like, oh, why did I spend $40 on that, or $60 or whatever, and then they won't want to buy another one. It's a lame argument, but that's basically what their argument was. And that's how they were harmed by the Game Genie.
While Judge Smith was unable to certify that the Game Genie users would not infringe on Nintendo's copyrights, she did include that Galoob had not violated the Copyright Act and ruled in favor of the toy manufacturer, ordering Nintendo to pay the company $15 million for lost sales. Yeah, that was the money that was held in retention, as I recall, because Carl has gone through this in his following of the case, but
Right.
Nintendo basically had to put up money for potential lost sales on Galoob's part, and if they lost, they would turn over that money, which they did, because they lost. When the case came up for appeal before Judge Jerome Ferris in 1992, he affirmed Judge Smith's opinions. Nintendo did not concede defeat, however, until the U.S. Supreme Court denied to hear arguments on the case on March 22nd, 1993, sealing the decision. All right, now we're going to get into the shady part of this, I guess.
Ooh, here we go.
Alpex Computer
Patent
Corporation
troll time.
versus Nintendo of America. With the exception of the original Magnavox Odyssey, which had several games hardwired into its circuitry, all the home game television consoles that retailed in the early 1970s were single-game or dedicated systems.
No! Well, I mean, there were no other
Or
in the early
dedicated.
1970s. Well, no, but they're not single game. He's using dedicated and single game as a synonym of single game.
It's true. Hockey and soccer are available.
Not even that. I mean, URL released a game that had a driving game and ball and paddle games together. So, I mean,
Yes.
there were even
Not
more
necessarily.
significant than just Pong, variants.
In
Target
1974,
shooting can't.
Alpex Computer Corporation created and patented a technology that enabled consoles to play multiple games stored on ROM chips stored in game cartridges. I mean, they didn't patent the game cartridge part of that.
No.
So I'm going to call that an error, actually.
And there were people, and their names were Wallace Kirshner and Lawrence Haskell. There were people that did this. Alpex Computer Corporation is not a people, despite what Citizens United would have you believe. It's not an error. I'm just being snarky.
The first company to license Alpex's technology was Fairchild Camera and Instrument. Possibly the only, but I don't know, actually. So,
Well,
which is-
they're the only ones that licensed it in that sense, but others licensed it after they were sued by Alpex.
which used it in the Channel F game console released in 1976. The Fairchild
this is
Channel
so
F was the
misleading, 'cause
first
I
game
don't-
console to
yeah,
use interchangeable-
Because I don't think he understood Kent probably didn't understand the case himself, because nobody knew who Alpex was. I mean, it is technically correct to say that they used Alpex technology in the Channel F, but Alpex's technology basically was the Channel F. Yes, they changed it to work with a different microprocessor, but it's like, that was the console.
2 years later, Alpex applied for patent protection on that technology and received the patent number 26,555, also known as the 555 patent. Of course, they got to get the catchy ones, and then Bear has to have the
In
super
the pipe,
complicated
555.
Let me. Right. I don't know which one this is, so let me double check. Because it says 2 years later, so that's 1978. This might be a separate patent filing thing,
Yeah.
like the reissue on the Magnavox patent is so hard to explain. Nope,
Yes.
nope, this is wrong. They already
Am I not
they
surprised?
filed this in 75. Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Applied for patent protection. Yeah, and the application was granted 1977. So, yeah, this is all wrong. And actually, I think
Kent.
even earlier, I think that the no patents were filed.
Oh, Kent, you lovable
1974.
son of a gun, you.
Let me... Of course, it's goddamn impossible. No, like the Google Patents thing changed it so you can't easily search companies.
Yeah.
Oh.
It just states like here's the current assignee, but you can't click it to see like what else is assigned to them. You have to go and do a stupid search, anyways. Complaining about researching. After receiving its patent, Alpex embarked on a campaign to enforce it. If Alpex couldn't do shit, they didn't have no money. Selling non-exclusive licenses to companies that infringed. Magnavox, Atari, Bally, Mattel, and Coleco were just a few of the companies that Alpex contacted. Though,
Yes. Selling non-exclusive licenses to companies that infringed. I believe what they did is threatened to sue unless the patents were licensed. It's not like they came up to the door and was like, I'm selling these fine leather patents.
Though the other settlements sums is not public, it is known that Atari paid $380,000 to settle the affair.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I don't know where that comes
how that's known,
Yeah.
Mr. I don't cite my sources.
Yeah. Okay. Why is this highlighted? Alpex declared Chapter 11.
It's code. It's a coding problem.
Oh, okay.
It's linking to the chapter.
Okay. Yeah, I remember.
I have that problem in my book with the Odyssey 2 because it thinks that the 2 is a footnote.
And had ceased operation in 1983. As the company dissolved, creditors found that its only valuable asset was the 555 patent. Take it, Alex.
In 1983, after the settlement with Atari and another with Magnavox, counsel for Alpex sent infringement letters to approximately 70 companies. These letters announced that Alpex had recently granted licenses under the patent to Atari and Magnavox and stated that Alpex had recently obtained information indicating that your company manufactures and/or sells video game cartridges and/or consoles, which may infringe the subject patent.
I'm sure they got they got buoyed by the fact that Magnavox was suing Activision and won.
Oh yeah. No, this was all patent troll stuff because I mean the inventors were long gone. The company was gone. It was patent trolling.
Yep. Of the 70 companies that received the letter, 6 companies expressed interest in settling without litigation. By 1985, Alpex had won licensing agreements in suits against 10 companies. Alpex had an ongoing suit with Parker Brothers, the result of which was stayed pending the results of the case against Nintendo. Okay. Against Parker Brothers. Like for when they made cartridges in the
Probably.
Atari era? Like, okay.
Technically, in 1985, that would have been Kenner Parker, but whatever.
Most companies preferred to pay Alpex
They
rather.
still had money.
Most companies preferred to pay Alpex rather than risk a court battle. This is especially true of Japanese companies, which were supposedly scared that U.S. jury awards might reflect anti-Japanese sentiments. Sega Enterprises.
Probably true.
Sega Enterprises, for instance, elected to purchase a license from Alpex in 1993. Nintendo, however, refused to settle, so Alpex sued for willful infringement of the 555 patent. At one point, Nintendo offered a $39 million settlement.
3.9.
$3.9 million settlement. In the case, which was tried before Judge Kimba Wood, Bill Clinton nominated Kimba Wood for the post of Attorney General after the nomination of Zoe Baird was withdrawn. The process ended with Janet Reno getting the position.
Thanks for that bit of trivia there, Kent.
of the South New York district in Manhattan. I'm pretty sure it would be the Southern district.
Southern District of
Yeah.
New York, yeah. SDNY.
They hinged on the question of technology. The Nintendo claimed that while the NES did use interchangeable cartridges, the bitmapping technology developed by Alpex was not powerful enough to handle the sophisticated images in NES games.
They tried that in the Magnavox cases. It never works. Dale, you be a judge.
This is Archer.
Yeah, different judge.
Ben Archer. Gotcha. Television the television raster comprises discrete slots or bars, approximately 32,000, which the cathode ray beam illuminates on a standard cycle, which in turn creates the image on the television screen. I'm so clever. The patented 32,000 memory positions needed to represent the raster image. The RAM holds at least 1 bit of data for each position in the memory map of the raster. Accordingly, the video display system is called bit mapping.
I feel sorry for whichever one of your clerks had to actually figure out how that worked and type it into your opinion.
According to Nintendo's defense, Alpex RAM-based technology was simply too slow. Nintendo's lawyers claimed that the NES featured a patented picture processing unit that received preformed slices of data. Dale.
Oh. The PPU receives performed horizontal slices of data and places each slice in one of the 8 shift registers, each of which can store a maximum of 8 pixels. 3 slices of data are then processed directly. The PPU repeats this process to assemble the initial image on the screen. Thereafter, it repeats the process as necessary to form changes in images throughout the progression of the game. Nintendo refers to the PPU as an on-the-fly system.
The fancy way of saying it uses tile-based graphics.
Yeah,
Preformed clusters, 8x8 squares of graphical elements.
Lawyers have to redefine everything, okay, Alex? The case turned into a debate on whether the on-the-fly graphic system did indeed differ from the technology in the Alpex patent. Nintendo maintained that while Alpex's bit mapping was fast enough for games with linear play images, it lacked the speed for games with animated cartoon characters, such as Mario. The highlight of the case was when John Strouch, lead attorney on the Alpex team, cross-examined Nintendo expert witness Stephen Ward. Strouch questioned Ward about whether differences between linear play images and animated cartoons. Strouch tried to corner Ward into explaining the precise differences between the two types of graphics. Ward, either unwilling or unable to specify, refused to be pinned down, though he maintained he could detect concrete differences, having viewed hundreds of games. What? Why is this a highlight? I don't get it.
Probably because one of the court opinions called it a highlight, so Kent's just calling it a highlight.
To clarify, Strouch drew a stick figure that he indicated as a drawing of a hockey player. Ward agreed that the next character would definitely be classified as a linear image. Next, Strouch covered the figure red and asked if it was still a linear image. When Ward said that it was, Strouch drew a large bulge on the player that he indicated as a hip and asked if it was still linear. Ward answered that they had entered into a region in which he had no answer. Strouch added 2 little arms and asked if they were still in a gray area in which Ward could not distinguish between linear images and cartoons. Ward said, "I believe that one could arbitrarily decide to draw the line either way in that case." Now, using your terminology and understanding what we are using your technology in the way you want to define this, if I add a nose, are we still in the situation where we can put this on one or either side of the line? Ward responded, "I think that at some point when you add features that no longer that make it look like a human form, for example, then it's no longer a linear play image. And if you keep adding noses and arms, then you do cross that line. Stretch. Let me add a little tiny tail here. Well, let's say that this is an animal combination human-animal cartoon, just with adding a tiny tail. Have we yet reached the point where you're willing to say this is not a linear play image?
We are getting close to that point, yes.
Okay, why don't we put a beard on it? Where are we now?
Okay, I am willing to say that it is not a linear player.
Okay, now I know how you are drawing the line. If we have a nose, 2 little arms, a tail, a hip, and the configuration I have drawn, except for the beard. You don't know whether it's a linear play image or not, but if we add the beard, it is not. Okay.
I'm sure that lawyer had a great time doing that cross-examination because that is so ridiculous, and he is pointing out the ludicrousness of the argument.
Yeah, I mean, the argument sucks. It's like, this is not what you should be arguing on.
Yeah, exactly.
This is, yeah, whoever coached this guy is completely at fault.
Chewbacca is a Wookiee, but he lives with the Ewoks on the Force Moon of Endor. It makes no sense!
According to Alpec's attorneys, Don Strouch and Thomas Young, members of the jury, tried to duck behind the rail of the jury box so that the rest of the court would not see them laughing during this exchange. The jury agreed with Alpec, finding that Nintendo was willfully infringing Alpec's patent and that 118 of the games that had been introduced for the NES before the patent expired on July 31st. July 31st what?
Right.
Infringed on the 555 patent. Alpec was awarded $208 million for damages, stating that she saw scant evidence of willful infringement. Judge Wood did not add further punitive damages to the award, but he allowed interest and legal fees to be tacked on, bringing it to $252 million, one of the largest patent awards in history.
Which is probably why they decided that case was important enough to preserve.
And they appealed it.
Well, no, but there are a lot of appealed cases that still hit the shredder, but this is like one of the only trial-level cases that the New York Archive has held on to of the video game cases. They still have the trial case because it was picked for preservation for being a significant patent case.
Yeah, but I was just saying that in terms of saying that they awarded them for damages, nope, they appealed it, and they won.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yes, they did.
Judge Glenn Archer of the Federal Circuit did not see substantial evidence of infringement when the case went to a federal appeals court on November 5th, 1996. After a thorough investigation of the bitmap and on-the-fly technologies, he ruled that there was insubstantial evidence that the devices operated in the same way. Based on his finding, Judge Archer reversed the original decision. Though I think they
Which, of course...
Sorry,
go ahead. Well, I was going to say, which, of course, is fascinating because, you know, basically this is the decision that should have been reached in some of those Magnavox cases.
Right.
But judges didn't understand technology well enough back then, and so they didn't care that it was done completely differently.
And there were, like, you know, there were residual lawsuits out of this. This continued in, like, to 2004 or something like that between Alpex and Nintendo.
Yeah, it went on for a long time.
Yeah. And General Electric got in there, too, because they had those RCA patents that they were protecting, too.
And I mean, they are very different. A bitmap display and a tile-based display with sprites overlaid on top of it are very different ways of rendering graphics. Even a non-technical person like me knows that.
Right. So,
TV.
So, yeah, at the end of this chapter, this is definitely one of these things where it's like, you know, people say Kent is very readable, but then he just dumps these highly technical court terms because he's just copying from the decision that was printed in a legal journal.
This is the least readable chapter. I mean, I like it, but it is the least readable chapter.
Yeah, for nerds of history, we especially like it because it gives us some insight into things we didn't know very much about. But yeah, it is like it just introduces so much and just expects you to kind of follow along with it. I'm going to split
with me, and you'll be in a world of pure litigation.
All right, I'm going to split the recording here, but we will continue in just a sec.